OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
7:30 on this Tuesday morning's OTB AM. You're very welcome along, as per always. We're here, as usual, until 10 AM this morning with all your morning sport. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Westmeath's Adrian Barry, good morning.
Shane, good morning to you.
Keeping well?
I heard you talking, was it yesterday or was it last week? You were talking about all the great intros you like to give people. Jared doesn't do it.
Yeah.
And that's the best you can come up with.
I mean,
that was pitiful. You had to give that no thought whatsoever.
Sligo's Kathleen McNamee, good morning.
Good morning, guys.
Can't do much better. What else am I going to say?
I mean, for this time in the morning to have that much energy,
Kathleen. Don't try and defend him here.
This is my first cappuccino of the morning, Adrian. So I mean, Jesus, give me some credit here.
That's fair enough.
We have the Australian Open in front of us. Just gone to an ad break there. Andy Murray reeling in the years. He'll be 30. What did I say? He's 36, 35 at the minute. 36 in May, and they're involved. He's embroiled in a final set against the Italian Matteo Berrettini, the 13th seed. So Murray winning the first couple of sets, 6-3, 6-3. Berrettini taking the third on a 6-4 scoreline, then in a tiebreak in the fourth, and it's currently 5-4 Berrettini on serve in the fifth and final set. So, I mean, as you were saying, Kathleen, we never get live sport on AM. We never get to enjoy and watch it and call something
so
live.
Nice. Like there was, the World Cup kind of worked because it was just after the show finished and at least there was sport on for the morning in the office. But I always love when there's actually live sport on AM because it makes me feel like, okay, yeah, no, we're properly doing sport right because we actually have stuff to react to live. And we couldn't ask for a better one to be on while we're actually live other than Murray and Berrettini, because obviously Berrettini, one of the great stories that came through Wimbledon in the last few years, and then Andy Murray is just such an iconic figure.
Yeah.
We've Catherine Murphy coming up later, who's actually at that match in Melbourne, so she's going to be able to give us a really good insight on it, which I'm excited to hear about.
Apparently a lot of heat in Melbourne overnight as well. Well, not overnight for them, but they had to pause play, not for this game of course because it's under the roof, the Rod Laver Arena. But yeah, I mean, madness, and they take into account the wind and everything else, so not easy to play a sport like tennis in a bit of heat.
And it would, the odds would have been very much against Murray. Obviously he's been the last couple of years struggling with various injuries and the possibility that he might actually leave the game at some point. So and he's an out lad essentially now against, like Kathleen said, the up and coming hot shot of the game. Been watching a bit of as I had to do obviously last week with the documentary makers. Break point.
A point break.
Pause for a second and then think about that one. And yeah, Berrettini obviously is an interesting character. But yeah, as you say, Murray was 2-love up, and you kind of thought, like, Jesus, what an opportunity he has here. But I know that over the course of the game he's been sort of fading a bit, and obviously fitness will be a factor. He's a good off season.
Yeah,
but
he's looked okay in this fifth.
He's settled it. I have to say, he's really settled it. There was a moment when he was 2-1 up and there was a tie break in the fourth, and it looked like Murray, because of his age and because of all those factors, had sort of got himself into a moment where it was win the tie break or lose the match, and it felt like that was sort of playing out. And there was a brilliant point in the tie break at 4-4, quality shots on both sides, and ultimately Berrettini wins out, and you think, right, that's it, he's going to go on and kick on. He did actually win that set, but there was a real statement of intent from Murray in the point afterwards where he hits this beautiful pass shot.
It is
past
very
Berrettini, so
classic Murray though as well, to go all the way to the 5 sets, and I think that's what kind of does him down in like the later stages of these competitions when he does get through, because he'll either roar to a 2-love up or else he'll go down by 2 and he'll have to like come back and actually really put in a fight. And just with the way his body is, like his hip, I don't know how it is still operating at the moment. Like he's had so many issues with it over the years, and yet he's still out there. His knees are bloody at the moment. You know, he looks like he's been through a proper battle, and this is just the first round of the competition.
He's unbelievable. That's gone out. So for people just tuning in, so it's 5-4 Berrettini on serve in the final set, 30-15 to Murray in this particular game. So it's a cracker of a game.
Starting to level it, yeah.
Starting to level it. So we'll keep you up to date in that game, and of course maybe bring you the tiebreak live if we get that far. Andy Murray.
Tiebreak will last about a half an hour. I think that's
true. Yeah. So
we'll
just stay on
your tennis commentary, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, John Duggan did a horse racing commentary live on there once, which is tough because you're trying to see which horse is which. You know, sports, so not easy. I had a moment where I thought of Andy Murray at the weekend. I did my first ever hot yoga class at the weekend.
It's quite a statement. I did my first ever hot yoga class and I was thinking about Andy Murray.
Because my hips were so sore after. I was like, Jesus, I've never moved my hips like that in years.
Why?
I've never done yoga before, never mind hot yoga in a room of 40-50 degrees Celsius, and Jesus, I I haven't sweated that much ever. That's a fact. One of my mates just said, "Do you want to go to hot yoga class this weekend?" I said, "It's January, dry January, feeling wholesome. Let's do something positive for the body." And I'd say 10 minutes in, I regretted it. This was a 60-minute class, so I was like, "Nah, this is tough." So
have you ever listened to the 30 for 30 documentary? ESPN did one on Bikram Choudhury, who created hot yoga.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Is he a controversial character? Is that right?
Very, very controversial. Right. Yeah, in the very classic, a man in a position of power who brings in people who are maybe looking for something or looking for someone to give them some sort of purpose or meaning, and then takes advantage of them. But so there's two. There's one on Netflix that you can actually watch, and then there's the ESPN 30 for 30 podcast, but they're both very good. I would recommend.
Right, must give that a watch. Fergus Q on the YouTube comments, keep them coming in, by the way. Says cracking shirt. I presume
sarcastic comment of the day there.
Talking about me. Thanks a million, Fergus. Much appreciated. This is just for Adrian Barry. To be honest with you, I know Adrian, you're a fashion fiend yourself, so.
It's kind of confusing having Adrian here today. It made me feel like I was heading into the Friday.
It's kind of nice. Yeah, when Adrian pops in during the week, you're like, weekend feel. That must be quite nice to know that you bring positive energy because of your links to the
because
weekend.
of the day I broadcast on. Exactly. Absolutely. That's what I want to be known as.
Yeah. You've been you were busy last night, Adrian, watching a different sport.
I don't watch too much basketball. Maybe like a lot of us around here, because like I've so much sport in my life that the room for more sport is just, and the time it's on, exactly. But actually, because there was no real football, there was like League One or whatever it was on last night, there wasn't really much to look at, and I found myself trawling around. I was looking for a bit of Tom Brady action, but that wasn't starting until 1 o'clock, I wasn't going to get that far. And then I found this, and it was like Red Zone for NBA basically, and it's like a sort of low enough production show where they like just bounce around all these games, and I got hooked into watching a bit of the Pacers, and I thought, this is great, and obviously Steph Curry was doing his thing, and I thought this is good, and it was sort of getting down to the championship minutes. There was like a couple of minutes left, there was very little between them, and suddenly they just bounced on over to the Knicks and the Raptors, and I was like, no, I've invested some time over here, leave me at this thing. But actually they knew what they were doing. It was absolute classic stuff at the Garden, and really tight finish. And as I said, like I don't watch basketball an awful lot. You tune into it every now and then, pay a bit of attention to the main stories that happen, but certainly no aficionado. But just the way the whole thing played out at the end, the only NBA game I've been to is a Knicks game at the Garden, and what a sensational.
That's not a bad one to.
The way you set that up was like it was going to be disappointing.
I've only been to a Knicks game in the Garden. Like
it was sensational. It was around the time that the long period where the Knicks were crap, so the result didn't go the way that night. But brilliant last night. It didn't go the way in the end last night either. But there was just the whole drama of how it all unfolded, and it looked like the Knicks had thrown their way towards the end. Randall with an offensive foul at the end, and they looked as if for the entire whatever that was, about 7 or 8 minutes that I'd seen, they couldn't stick two free throws together. They were just like picking off 1 point apiece, and it felt as if they could do any of that, they would have got over the line. But Raptors went on to win the thing at the end, and it was just a whole drama. The thing, there was like a showbiz opportunity for a 3-point on the buzzer from Brunson for the Knicks to win the thing, and he doesn't manage to get it down, and it's
drama.
It was such drama. It was brilliant. It was like there was loads of it happening. The Red Zone thing was just pointing the spotlight on the fact that there was like loads of that happening around. Like the landslide wins for any side weren't huge, but I kind of felt as if I don't know if you've seen the Muffin Top episode of Seinfeld, but one of the characters decided that they only like the top of the muffin, they don't want the rest of it. I kind of felt like that would be my approach to basketball.
If you get the best bits.
If they could start every match on a day at like quarters apart, so you could watch the final quarter of every match, that'd be. I think I could sit down and watch a lot.
Good way to watch it. Is it a good fan experience? The
brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Well, as you can imagine, with any working sport, you've got all the food and drink that you need. You've got the foam finger out. There's no bad. Like we were towards the back of the arena, so our view should have been not great. There's no real bad view. Like given the basketball court, it's not like giant football stadium or whatever where you can be really far removed from the action. So no, it was.
I've seen that. There was a viral.
Sensational.
There was a photo doing the rounds the other day online. The NBA. It was one of the record attendances. San Antonio Spurs set the NBA regular season game attendance record, but there was photos then from up in the stands, and like some people have a horrific view of the court. They're so far back. It's almost like a football stadium.
Right.
The court's right in the middle, and there's people around the court, and then there's little kind of tiered seating near there, and then it's a gap of no people, and then it's the actual football stands, and then people are way up in the.
Well, we
the
were
bleachers
very
up
far
there.
back.
You were.
It's fine. Yeah, we were at like nearly the back row of the Madison Square Garden, and it was
Maybe it just depends on the one you're in, though, as well.
probably, to be fair.
I mean, it's like any football
you could see
stadium
it, yeah.
or any.
And also, we were totally in awe. Like, it was like, do you know what I mean? We were like two absolute newbies.
But I think what basketball does well, where say maybe NFL or something doesn't, for people who aren't maybe as invested in it as us, is that the pace of it is far quicker, and like even any entertainment they have in the middle, it goes a lot quicker than the NFL does. Whereas NFL, you kind of have to commit yourself to a couple of hours, and very little of that time actually being playtime, no matter how good it is.
Funny, it leads in nicely to the match day experience. I know this was something you'd mentioned, Adrian, as well. The IRFU engaging with supporters to enhance the Aviva Stadium match day experience. This is something that we've talked about constantly. In terms of when there's live commentaries on, and even there's music blaring in the background of the Aviva, and sometimes the fan experience of the Aviva Stadium can leave a little bit to be desired, to say the least. But this is quite an interesting bit of research.
Just to sample some, they've spoken to some fans, which is some cynical response to that online. That's fair enough. That's kind of what you need to do, speak to the fans. I don't know what the sample size seems to be small enough, but they were saying that 7 in 10 of the people who were sampled claimed that they would not support a ban on alcohol. 7 in 10 said that they plan to have an alcoholic drink during the games, and 1 in 4 people felt that getting up and coming back with drinks during the game greatly diminished their experience of the game. Now, 1 in 4 felt they greatly diminished it. That feels to me there might have been another question where potentially 2 in 4 felt as if it's somewhat diminished. You know yourself the way these things are worded. So I'm sure there was an aspect of that. And like, look, it is hard, because even if you watch the tweet that the RFU sent out yesterday to announce this, if you look at the reaction to it, there's a whole host of different demographics of people going to the game, in terms of, like, there's some people with kids, there's some people in their 20s who are going on the lash, there's some people in their 50s or 60s who are going to have 2 or 3 drinks, and I don't know, I've probably experienced most of those aspects of it, and it can be certainly frustrating when there are people up and down all the time. When it's the same people up and down all the time, that can be frustrating. But there are small measures, I think, that I don't think that they need to have a business as usual approach to this, the RFU. I think that there are small measures they could put in place. One thing that I was suggesting before was maybe like some seat service. It's not an ideal solution, because you do have somebody obviously roaming around the stands, but at the same time, at least that's somebody who's got a bit more cop on than the person who's 3 or 4 or 5 points in and who couldn't give 2 hoots. They know
you get it in the NFL, don't you? And the basketball probably as well.
Exactly, you do. You get loads of that, and it's manageable. And it also means that the queues then inside are obviously a bit less. Obviously, people will need to go to the toilet if there's enough seat service. But then you could obviously have the secondary bit of having the stewards ensure that there needs to be a break and play before people will be allowed to return to their seats. You could also ask people who are getting out of their seats to adopt the same approach with some PA messaging. Wait for a break and play before you get up. Like, I know I was at a game recently at the Aviva. It might have been one of the Novembers, and it was definitely that same experience where there was 3 people coming back from the bar in the middle of the game. There was a load of action. We were down the right hand side. There was a load of action down the left hand side. They stood right in the way of it as there was a key try opportunity happening, and blocked the view for a couple of hundred people behind them.
Jesus.
Infuriating, like, and zero cop on. Now, there were at least 1 sheet to the wind at that stage, so that's going to happen.
Still, you're missing.
There's probably some measures, I think, that they
you've paid for your ticket. You're missing a live moment.
That's my thing. Like, surely if you do want to have a couple of pints during the game and you want to go, like, just order 2 pints at the start of the game. If you want another one at halftime, go at halftime, come back. Like, I also just don't understand where a bit of cop on and common sense doesn't come into these things. Like, obviously the Aviva will have to put in some sort of regulations, because not everyone is going to have that, but the majority of people, and from what it seems is that a lot of people are going and getting up during games, just buy a couple of pints at the start, and then hey presto, you're fine.
I have to say, I have been the soldier who's wanted a pint in the middle of a half, right? But I will also say that has generally tended to not be the most dramatic games against the biggest opponents. Like, it's often, to be honest, you're down there watching Ireland-Fiji, and it's like, it's nice to be able to watch stuff on the pitch, and it's entertaining, and you're obviously into it, but it's not quite like, I can't miss a couple of minutes here to go and get a beer. So I wouldn't be saying that I'm...
and this is an IRFU, this isn't FAI. Like, the soccer matches at the Aviva are different in that, well, you can't drink at your seat, I'm fairly sure, for a start, so you don't have that element of people kind of standing in front of you and getting in the road. But it's...
I like the choice, but I mean, I do understand all sides. There's no solution that's best for everybody anyway. That's the other
but also
side
with the FAI, like, I was at Ireland-Norway with my dad, and the majority, like the seats were kind of empty because the majority of people were just standing inside in the corridors outside the bar watching the match through the windows because they did want to have a pint. So like there is also that side of it as well, because I know a few times people have said that the Irish games are better, but when I saw, and I know like it was a friendly and it wasn't anything mad and people were probably more going as a recreational thing than a ardent supporter thing, but even still, like it was weird because especially after the first half, most of the seats just emptied out and you could just see the majority of people, and like there was about 3 deep standing in the corridors as well. You know, it wasn't a case of where you actually had a nice little perch for yourself. It was quite a lot of people. So
well, I think you could do that for food. I think you could do the seat service thing for food as well.
Yeah,
do you know, like, 'cause you go out at half time, but kids are match mad at the minute. They want to go to every game that happens, and you stand in the queue for 50 minutes at half time, and it's an absolute killer. Like,
yeah. You don't mind doing it for yourself, but when you have kids in tow, I'm sure.
And they're pulling and dragging, and there's like, yeah.
And also you're trying to keep them sometimes like entertained during a game, because like it can be a long time for a kid to keep attention on something. So if someone's actually coming to your seat and being like, do you want a hot dog, do you want some chips, whatever it is, that's probably going to keep them entertained 100%. For a good few minutes compared to standing in those awful queues.
My kids we play a game of where's the ball at the minute. They're at that sort of an age. And so that's great. No, it's really good, and it engages them for a little period of time. But what happens is they keep going, there it is. There it is. There it is. There it is. So you can imagine the reaction from everybody around when that goes on for long enough.
You need to play I Spy and pick something very random that a kid mightn't even know what it is. And then they'll be there the whole game trying to pick.
We're going to Crow Park on Sunday for the club final, so I'll keep that in mind. Yeah,
absolutely. Apologies if my eyes keep getting drawn downwards to the screen here, but the Australian Open is ongoing. Murray and Berrettini. Murray saved a match point in the 10th game there and secured the game to make it 5-5. Berrettini won his service game then to make it 6-5. It's currently Murray's service game here, and he needs to, of course, win this game to take it to a deciding tiebreak in the 5th and final set here, the Australian Open in Melbourne. They're on the Rod Laver Arena. Probably a good time to mention what's coming up for the rest of the show between now and 10 o'clock as well, as Catherine mentioned, plenty to come. 7:50 we'll be joined very shortly by Mark Lawrenson to talk to Liverpool, the Premier League season so far, plenty of other talking points. David Moyes has done a very interesting interview, tell-all interview as well. We've only seen a teaser of that so far. But Lauro, of course, a good friend of Moyes, so we'll get his thoughts on that. 8:10, Catherine Murphy live from Melbourne with the latest. Hopefully this game will have finished by that point. Andy Murray and Matteo Berrettini. We've got Shay Given at around 10-9, talking all things Newcastle. And they're up to 3rd in the Premier League. They're flying high. Semi-finals of the Carabao Cup as well. 9:10, Courtney Cronin to discuss the NFL ahead of the divisional run games this weekend. Tom Brady out. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers losing last night to the Dallas Cowboys, and Brady, is it his last time on an NFL pitch? It certainly appears to be his last time playing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but whether or not he heads into the punditry game right now remains to be seen. And at 9:30, Dominic King is on the show. We had a couple of other last bits to mention. I know, Adrian, in the back pages of some of the papers we have Paulie Clifford's infamous speech now about the referees, and talk of maybe some disciplinary breaches or disciplinary punishments to come in. I guess we don't know how it's going to be dealt with at this stage.
Yeah, the Irish Daily Mail this morning, it is on most of the pages, and there's some quotes in them, and some of them, and he's due on off the ball tonight as well. If they can get themselves out of the Golden Nugget, I suspect that he might make an appearance there. Michael Clifford writing about it in the Irish Daily Mail. Clifford may be asked to apologise for speech. GAA Chiefs could be set to ask Kerry star Paulie Clifford to apologise to referee Thomas Murphy for remarks made in his controversial acceptance speech after Sunday's junior final. But I don't see anything else in there that other than maybe he's got a source that's given him this information, but I don't see anything concrete that would be the case. And look, at maybe he'll just do that over the passage of time. There definitely seems to be like a narrative coming from the Fussa camp straight away from the David Clifford interview afterwards, that listen, this is all just part of the game and this is what happens, and like, I don't know, the context, what happens here will be interesting to see. There'll be a call for calm heads, obviously, and for people to sit down and establish exactly the facts. Was there a bit of John on the pitch in the lead into this stuff? Was there stuff coming from the Fussa side that
inevitably there were things said
that might have been said that was sort of context? Like, I'm not saying that there was any context, by the way, to that Anton Coyle short elbow. That was absolute. I think you described it in the show yesterday as thuggery. It was and it did take the sheen off what was an amazing game, an amazing day. I'm sure it took some element of the sheen off the win. I saw footage online last night of Stewartstown team arriving in home, and I'm sure it takes some of the sheen off what should have been a big, despite the defeat, celebration for them, given the year they had as well.
That for me, Adrian, though, is the point in that I saw the same clip as well of the Stewartstown players arriving home, and it struck me last night. I was thinking, oh, maybe it takes a bit of the sheen off it, but then I was thinking, I don't think. I think that it's so commonplace in Gaelic football and hurling now to get involved in a lot of that aggro, a lot of the physicality and the things that are said, some of the terrible things that are said between players. I actually think it's so common that it's not being thought about in Stewartstown at the minute. Like, I think it's not.
Didn't look like it from the video, to be honest. Like, that was proper bonfires all the way home. Everyone out in the town.
100%.
Kids allowed to stay up late to like celebrate with the team.
Yeah.
I don't think
just part of the game.
Yeah. If anything was being discussed in the pubs, like after the match, I'd say it's probably like, oh, what did he say to you?
I'm sure.
And people are going to give their own people that benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm sure that they were probably heroed for it. Do you know what I mean? That's the horrible reality of it. I'm sure there was a lot of them that, like, oh, you know, I'm sure all this chat was happening at a very real level in terms of, you know, what may or may not have been said on the pitch and the actions that were taken. And I'm sure there's like they're all out to get us, and, you know, I'm sure there's that siege mentality aspect to it now, although it'd be too late to affect the result. But it would be interesting to see if they could just do some sort of a report into it and establish facts and let everybody know about that, and like for it to be a warning to whoever the next team that decide they want to go the same route.
Yeah, look, it doesn't take away from Stewartstown year. They were Tyrone champions and intermediate and provincial champions as well. They've had a fantastic year. The point was that, as I said, the Anton Coyle thing was
I think
horrific.
It does take away from the year. I genuinely, like, as a neutral observer looking at it, I would have no great sort of graw for looking at Stewartstown again on the TV in any kind of a game. I think that, like, that there's no good out of that. Like,
no, for sure.
I think it does for them. I understand Kathleen's point. That's totally fair enough. I'm sure that the celebrations were not long into the night and for a few nights, and more luck to them for the year they've had. But I think for the rest of us, we're entitled to say that was shocking. Yeah. And you said it yourself. There's no place for it in a football pitch. And
well, Anton Coyle shouldn't be near a football pitch for a long time.
I don't know.
The point is, he might only get a couple of game ban, judging by, you know, what we're reading in the papers. 1 game ban maybe for the other 3 Stewartstown players that were sent off.
That would seem to be. I don't know what the right number is, but that would seem to be low.
I mean, that's remarkably low.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of situation where I don't even know if you ban someone for games. I think you ban them for like a year, a couple of years,
it's a period
whatever
of
it is. Yeah, it's a period of time.
There is a message there. Like, you know, people look negatively upon the make an example of him thing, but I think that's fair enough. Like, I mean, it's not his fault that it was broadcast live on TV, but it was broadcast live on TV.
There's a lot of people looking at it. Aware of that.
The end of the game, on a more sort of a somewhat lighthearted note, reminded me of watching Game of Thrones. I don't know if you're a Game of Thrones aficionados, but at the end of the game just played out like an episode of Game of Thrones. Every new plot twist just had your jaw on the floor going, I've never seen this before, and surely that hasn't just happened. Surely not. Like the executioner wielding his sword over the head after, like in season 1, Sean Bean. You're
spoilers.
Like, surely. I mean, I'm hoping that I'm not spoiling it 10 years on. Ned Stark's neck is on the line in season 1, and you're like, no, but like this is going to be a dream sequence, Dallas style dream sequence, and he's going to emerge from the shower, and this actually, whatever the version of a shower at that stage was, surely not Hodor in like season 4. You couldn't believe that such an icon had been lowered to his death like this. Surely, and no more can happen at this stage. And then the most famous scene of them all was the end of the game as the full-time whistle is blown, the red wedding, akin to some, you know, that scene that happened at the end of the game. Scores being settled all over the shop, all parties losing key people, and ultimately no real winners at the end of the day.
That was beautiful,
it's fair. Poetry, Game of Thrones and Gaelic games mixed in together. Yes, it's wonderful. It kind of was one of those endings.
It was the red wedding at the end. It was just everybody was flailing, everybody had lost the plot. It was
should bring people's attention to this because Andy Murray, they're in the tie-break, and Andy Murray is steamrolling the tie-break so far. He's 5-0 up in the fifth set tie-break. He's got the serve for this next point. We might just stick with this for a second because this has been incredible from Andy Murray. To even get this far, as you said, Adrian, I mean, the 4th set, you're thinking he has to win this to get through because we know what his legs are like. His body is getting on in years, as we said earlier, but the fact that he's able to get to a 5th set and hopefully win it, was that out? I think it was out 5-1.
You'd got no odds on anybody saying, given Murray's age profile and the context of everything that's happened to him over the last couple of years, you got no odds on anybody saying if it got this stage of the game that he was going to do what he's doing right now.
Not a hope. But Bertini would have been the huge favourite. He's the 13th seed, of course, as well. So it would be a shock if Murray could do this. Of course, Murray. I think
you've also cursed him by saying he's doing great and he's 5-0
up. What is it, first to...
serving now to go 6-1.
I assume it's first to... it's first to 7, win by 2, isn't it? Mm-hmm. To win the tiebreak. So, I mean, he needs to do this. I'm starting to get nervous for Andy Murray. Of course, he's Scottish if he wins British if he wins and Scottish if he loses. Isn't that it with Andy Murray? So his nationality tends to change. He's one of the only
British
people
or English. They kind of they interchange them.
yeah, exactly. They don't really mind taking him as one of their own.
So you serve him for 6-1 and then Serve will cross over to Bertini.
Match point, yeah. He'll have a number of match points if he can. You know what? It's just a time for an ace, Andy. Come on, bang out an ace there, lad. You can do it. Oh, he hasn't done it. But it's out. 6-1. 6-1, Murray. Surely he can't lose it from here.
On the edge now.
Surely he can't lose it from here.
I want to hear your best BBC style Wimbledon commentary on this one now, Shane.
But the reality, I think, for Andy,
Sue Barker.
Yeah. I'm sure Andy Murray, if he wins this, will have his eyes set on obviously deeper into the tournament. But the reality is, from given where he's come from, this is total success for him.
Oh yeah, completely
incredible. No matter what happens for him after this, if he gets over the line.
Well, it's an easy sport to commentate on because during the rally you just don't talk at all.
This is also true.
No, we can't really get away with that. But Bertini serving here. Murray returns.
Serving for 6-2.
Hopefully it's not a rally of 40. It's out from Murray, so it's 6-2. This is tense.
Colin is telling us to move off the tennis. Yeah. Stop talking about tennis.
Sorry, it's first to 10. It's first to 10 apparently, so we can maybe talk away around this and come back to it because it's first to 10, 6-2. So yeah, that tiebreak's going to keep us occupied for the next little while. Keep the comments, by the way, coming in on the YouTube channel as well. A lot of people have their views on the fan experience at the Viva Stadium as well. Michael says the experience of stadiums for the last few years feels like forced entertainment with bad music and announcements, etc., and maybe too much influence from marketing teams or social media managers. There's definitely something in that. The music before games is just, you can't hear yourself think.
I think that for afternoon games, lower the volume down. Please lower the volume down.
Yeah.
At all these stadiums. Evening games, I don't mind it so much. There's a different profile of people at the game. It's not really a family thing if there's like 7, 8 o'clock start. So that's my view on it.
100%. Keep those comments coming in. We'll keep an eye on this tennis as well. But at 7:58 AM on this Tuesday morning, delighted to welcome the former Liverpool and Republic of Ireland international defender Mark Lawrenson to the show. Morning, Lauro. How are things?
All good, apart from a heating failure in the house, which is why I've got my cap on. But
right.
Other than that, we're all good.
Good Peaky Blinders hat. I like it. Yeah. You're pulling it off there, Mark. I have to say. Fair play to you.
I borrowed it off my dad who passed away. So
lovely.
Lovely.
Nice story to it as well. We'll keep an eye on this Andy Murray game. We'll update the listeners and viewers as things go. 6-3 Murray currently in this tiebreak. We do want to talk Liverpool though, Lauro, because I mean the result of the weekend was disappointing again, but more so the performance against Brighton. 3-0 defeat.
Yeah.
I think Klopp described it as the low point of his own Liverpool tenure. Would you go along with that?
Well, I think he wasn't even stronger, which was ever. I think he said. I thought he said that the worst result ever in performance from a team, and we know they've been struggling. And the problem is, we know what the problem is, which is obviously midfield, and that's affected everything that Liverpool do. Because if you think about it, they're very attacking wise from the back with the two full-backs. But there's no protection in midfield at the moment. There's no creativity. So you can have who you want up front and they just aren't creating any chances. And they're in a rut. And obviously the problem is tonight they go to Wolves, which will be tight because of the way that Wolves are playing under Lopetegui. And I wouldn't mind betting they might even go out of the competition, which I don't think in Klopp's mind will be the end of the world. But then really you're talking about having to at the very least beat Champions League, and that's around the corner. Real Madrid at home in a couple of weeks, I think.
It's a realistic possibility, Mark. I mean, you're looking at the table here. They've already lost 6 times in the Premier League. They were only beaten 4 times in 63 games across all competitions last season. I mean, 10 points adrift of the top 4 as well. Is that a realistic possibility that they might not get that top 4? Because I mean, the way City and Arsenal, United and Newcastle are playing, it's a tough 4 to break into.
Absolutely. And I mean, Van Dijk missing as well, but he wasn't playing particularly well either. Yes, most definitely. And we all know, as I said to you before, the problem is that lacking in midfield players. I don't think Jordan Henderson made a tackle, apparently somebody said. at the weekend at Brighton. So it is a possibility. I mean, Klopp's been through this before, but he's looking at the players that he's got, and whichever way he changes them around at the moment, they're just not at it. I mean, they could easily have gone out against Wolves in the first game in the FA Cup because of the lack of VAR at that particular moment late on in the game. The kids are what they are, the kids, and they're not ready for it. And, you know, he's also a bit reluctant to chuck them in at the moment because the team's suffering and therefore they would suffer. And you bring kids in when the team's going well, just the odd one or two maybe. And they're just in a little bit of a mess. And, of course, everybody go and buy some players, go and do this and go and do that. But that's not the way that they operate at Liverpool. And we know they took Gakpo, and I think the reason they took him because they do believe that it was only going to get better and his fee was going to go up. And I think his time was now. So you understand that. But it's no good having these 5 or 6 outstanding forward players and not really supplying them with any chances. And, of course, you know, they all of a sudden are thinking, well, we're not going to get the ball, what we're doing. So, yeah, it is a bit of a mess at the moment. But, look, you know, the best thing about the football club is the manager. And he will sort it, but might just be one of those seasons where they miss out on everything, I'm afraid.
In relation to that point, Mark, about them that's not the way they do things at Liverpool. The midfield area specifically, like you look at Thiago, and beyond that, you have ageing players, leggy players, young players who maybe not up to it, particularly in the midfield area. That's not the way they do things at Liverpool, is a very fair comment. Is it about time now, probably a lot of Liverpools would say, that maybe they just need to change their ways, particularly in relation to that area of the pitch?
Well, yeah, good question. But I think the thing is that maybe as well, I mean, the owners will be aware of it. And the problem probably is that the players that they want, aren't available, or if they are, it's absolutely mad money. And really, apart from the purchase of Alisson and Van Dijk, they've not generally paid more than 30-40 million generally was what they paid for players if you look at them and made them all better. Certainly there's a whole host of players on that list, but it's one of those, isn't it? They took the lad on loan from Italy who's basically not played. I think, has he gone back now? I think he got injured. So I don't. It's one of those. They're not the kind of club under Klopp that just goes right. You know what? Whatever, we'll just have to go and buy X, Y, Z. That's not the way that they operate.
Should he, in that case, if they're not going to bring somebody in, like sticking with the system as it is, does he need to be more adaptable in that? Like if they're not bringing a player in, it's not working for them in midfield. Like you see the way teams are playing through them so easily. Does he need to change it up a bit, or is it just too un-Klopp-like?
I think it's a little bit of both. When you say change it up a little bit, I mean, basically, who else does he bring in? I mean, Oxlade-Chamberlain is playing at the moment, and I think most people would have looked at the Ox at the start of the season and thought, well, this will be his last year at Liverpool, and maybe even he might have gone in this transfer window because I'm afraid he's just off it. Kate has never really done it. He's one of the few Klopp signings that's not really done it. We've seen it in little bits and pieces where you think, wow, what a player, but he just disappears in games. And you know the kids, Elliot, etc., Carvalho. It's too early for them. It's too early for them to be playing on a regular basis, and you can actually destroy young players by consistently playing them. And the idea with young players is just to they can dip in and dip out. Curtis Jones, too many touches, really. When he's got the opportunity to play, he's not really. I mean, he came on obviously with that goal against Arsenal in the FA Cup, however, 2 or 3 years ago, and in all honesty, he's not kicked on. So it's a difficult one because what do you do? Do you put a defensive-minded player in there? I mean, Fabinho's. We went away at the World Cup and he's looked ordinary. And generally, Fabinho is a 7 or 8 out of 10 every time he plays. He sits in front of the back two and does whatever he needs to do. But he's just not at it as well at the moment. And I think a little bit you can go back to last season, and I think this is a relevant argument, which is they played in every single game possible, didn't they? So they got to 3 cup competition finals and obviously played all the games in the league. And they didn't have too much of a pre-season, and it was probably too early. And I know it's quite, people say, oh yeah, but it's the turn of the year now and everything. But if you look at them, generally, nearly all of them, they just all look leggy. And it's a really, really difficult one for the manager to cope with. And like anything, when you look like that, you kind of think, oh, we can give them a bit of rest, etc. But look, they're playing every 3 days at the moment, aren't they? Yeah, that's like everybody.
Yeah, fair point, Mark. I mean, the fatigue is certainly something that was picked up on and mentioned by Jordan Henderson and Jurgen Klopp after the match at the weekend. Just a brief departure to mention that Andy Murray is through to the second round of the Australian Open. He is beaten. Yeah, great result for Andy Murray.
Many years ago, I was on a plane from Barcelona back to England, and I sat next to him, and he was only about 16 or 17. And he used to do. I was sat in my seat, and then I saw this lad come down with all these rackets and everything. And I'm typical. I sat there and I said, "Oh, so you're a tennis player?" And he looked at me thinking, "You moron." But he's a really nice fella. And if you think about what him and Jamie have been through in their life, I mean, Dunblane. So and I always thought maybe about 18 months ago, well, that's probably the end of Andy Murray with his hip injuries, etc. And he's a fighter, isn't he? He really seriously is a fighter. Maybe he could play for Liverpool tonight against Wolves.
Was there a bit of game, recognised game, Mark? Did he know you were?
No, absolutely no idea. He just thought of this old buffer.
Did you give him the CV?
Get the Wikipedia out, no?
No. Didn't bother. No. In fact, to be fair, it was that long ago. I don't think Wikipedia was out.
Probably, that's a fair point. Yeah, but it's one of those things. He's quite impressive. I mean, physically, Murray. The fact that he's come through a 5-setter, especially against the 13th seed. Yeah. So it was 3-6, 3-6, 6-4, 7-6, 6-7. So Murray winning that final set tiebreak 10-6. So brilliant win for him on the Rod Laver Arena. We'll chat to Catherine Murphy a bit later in the show as well about that performance. Mark, did want to touch on when you're talking about the Liverpool tactics and formation. Like, I'm just reading here some of Klopp's comments from his press conference yesterday. He's saying ahead of this replay in the FA Cup tonight against Wolves, he has 2 senior strikers available. You'd imagine that's Salah and Gakpo. Nunez is likely to be an injury risk, but I mean that might inadvertently make sure that he moves from a 4-3-3 to a 4-4-2. It was 4-4-2 that they played against Man City this season when they won by 1-0. I mean, bit of cover for the fullbacks in that scenario as well. Are they better in a 4-4-2 than a 4-3-3?
Well, it's worth trying because at the moment it's not working, is it?
Yeah.
It's been sort of hoisted by his own sword, really, in many, many ways, because he loves the 2 fullbacks to get forward, and probably just at the moment is a little bit kind of, well, hold on, boys, because we're conceding goals on a regular basis. So, listen, he'll have thought long and hard about it. I don't think there's any doubt about that, but he very, very rarely changes the way that he plays because he has this belief, obviously, in the way that he plays. And as we know, generally, it's been very, very successful. So I'm not sure I'm doing the game tonight, but I'm sat here thinking I'm not quite sure exactly how he's going to set up his team to play. But I think at the very least at the moment, he's got to make them more difficult to play against, therefore more difficult to score against as well.
Is it a cycle, Mark? Because I was reading an interesting piece by Miguel Delaney in The Independent yesterday. He was talking about the famous, I think it was Bob Paisley originally said it, and Alex Ferguson adopted the quote as well, that, most great teams have a cycle of 3 or 4 years. If you look at it, this Liverpool team are in probably their 6th year of this cycle. So does he just have to nearly stop and rebuild the second team from here, or how do you think it'll work?
No, I think you're right. I think you're right, but I don't think it needs a massive rebuild. That's the thing. But it looks, as we spoke before, that this rebuild maybe not happen until the summer. And also, of course, in the background is what are the owners doing? Are they seriously looking for investment, but not over 50%? So they're still in control of the club, or are they just sort of sitting to themselves saying, you know what, let's just sell it and obviously go off and back to America and do whatever they want to do with the money? Generally, and they've been very, very successful as owners. They made the odd mistake, which owners haven't done, but they understand that, with having a sporting franchise, that you get a loss of form, you get injuries at key times, etc. So they're not exactly panicking. I think they've looked at the season, and it's one of those which is, look, let's get through to the summer, and have a little look and see what we can or cannot do regards new personnel, etc.
I think chaos has been a word that has followed Darwin Núñez around since he's joined. But I mean, I guess the absence and departure of Sadio Mane is being highlighted even more so now, Mark.
Yeah, well, it is, and you get that because Mane was great, and Mane was great without the ball. We know how good he was with the ball, but he's just one player. So I think Núñez will come good. I really seriously do. But at the moment, obviously, that's an issue. And having your strike, most of your strike force injured as well is just purely unlucky. And it's not like they've been pulling up in training or anything like that. It's all been in games. But I'm pretty sure it is all related to what they've been through in terms of last season. I mean, Jordan Henderson, I don't know how much he covers in terms of the games, wherever he goes and plays, etc. But he's way off the pace at the moment, and he's really, really struggling. And you're looking around and saying, well, who can we replace him with? Well, do you know what? They haven't really got anybody to replace him with. We can't stick catering again. Well, we can, but he's just never ever done it. You can see there's something there, but he's one of those that's failed. And when you look at Klopp signings, there are very, very few of those who have failed. And generally, when you actually seriously look at them over the last 5 or 6 years, as you were talking about, he's made very good players into world class, which is, for a coach, is obviously the best CV ever. So I think sometimes you look at it and think, it's just not. It's going to be one of those seasons. Whether it's one of those seasons and the next season is just as bad, I'm not sure. But obviously that's a long way off yet.
Speaking of things that might be a long way off, I was surprised to see some of the quotes from his press conference with the papers this morning, and he was talking about, like, the question came up about whether he might leave the club, and obviously he's very bullish about that. And unless I'm told to go, you said earlier on he's the best thing about the football club. It feels like we're a long way from that.
Oh, from him going? Yeah, no. I think, it's not so much with Klopp. It won't be losing games. It will just be kind of, waking up in bed and thinking, I've had enough, regardless. And I think that's just the way that he is. I mean, Liverpool did really, really well to attract him in the first place, because I think he was on, didn't he say he was having like a 1 year hiatus? And obviously his phone or his agent's phone would have been ringing all the time, etc. And he looked at Liverpool and kind of thought, you know what, there aren't many clubs that I would decide to change my mind for, but he did. But now he's the most important person at the football club. Absolutely. Without him, they wouldn't be anywhere near where they are or what they've done. So he is that important. You can feel it, you can see it with him that he's just thinking every time they play, going, what's going to happen today? And for a manager, that's the worst possible thing, because generally, with all his teams, he knows that they were going to win most of the games that they play in. But at the moment, he's looking and thinking, right, well, what's happening today? What else is going to go wrong against us? And, you don't feel sorry for yourself. It's just one of those things that happens. I mean, when I first signed in, God, it was 1981, at Boxing Day, we were beaten at home by Man City. We were beaten, I think, 3-1 at home against Man City. And we were 14th in the league. And this was a Liverpool team that had won the European Cup 6 months earlier in Paris, the 1-0, the Alan Kennedy goal. And all of a sudden, you can imagine all the local papers and TV and everybody saying, oh, they've gone, Liverpool have gone. That's it. It's the end of the cycle. Unfortunately, we had one or two young players come into the side, and we ended up winning the league. We went 20-odd games unbeaten. So you just never, ever know, do you? That's the thing with football. But at the moment, the way off the pace.
Just while we had you, Mark, I wanted to bring you this clip. So, of course, your good pal David Moyes and West Ham struggling at the moment, sitting in 18th in the Premier League standings and in a bit of relegation bother, but still plenty of time left. There's been a clip doing the rounds yesterday of David Moyes doing an interview with the Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett. Some really, really interesting things have already come out of this in terms of the teaser. Just for anyone who hasn't heard it, have a listen.
They would be out screaming at you at half time, they'd be screaming you at the end of the game. What's the toll of that?
David the Messiah Moyes,
one of the best known football managers across the globe.
Building teams with a clear identity.
So where am I looking and who am I talking to? I was desperate to be successful as a manager, and I had 11 years at Everton where we were finding it really difficult to break into the top four. The phone rang, it was Sir Alex, and he said, I'm retiring and you're the next manager of Manchester United. No interview, not saying, would you like to be? I met Ed Woodward the next day, back to his house again, we met the Glazers. It was 3 days, and that was as simple as that. To get that offer from the greatest manager maybe there ever was a great compliment. But maybe if I'd really looked into it in more detail and more depth, there was a huge change going to have to take place. I trusted Manchester United.
Do you feel like that trust was let down?
Definitely. But my biggest regret was...
We start with the story that has dominated the front pages, the sacking of David Moyes.
How did you find out that you're losing your job?
Media.
Oh, really?
If you've got any class or any style, you have to give bad news well.
What are those steps forward to get West Ham competing at the very top of the table?
I want to build a new West Ham. A lot of supporters might not like the thought of that.
When you look at where West Ham is now, do you worry about losing your job?
I've got to say...
Yeah, fascinating stuff from the diary of CEO Stephen Bartlett there, Mark. Like, even just the way in which he finds out he's getting the sack from United via social media. But for me, even just the fact that when he was getting the job at Old Trafford, just gets a call from Alex Ferguson, you're taking over from me, and he meets up with the hierarchy the following day. Some really interesting things, and I mean, fascinating stuff that we weren't quite aware of with David.
Yeah, well, as you know, I know him really well, so... and I went to quite a lot of the games at Man United when he got the job, which was quite interesting. Sat there in the director's box, obviously an ex-Liverpool player. He's driven, Moyes, absolutely, totally. He just lives for football. I mean, God help his missus Pam. I mean, she lives in Lytham up on the northwest, and you know, he's football, and obviously they're struggling at the moment, but. And I would say this, of course, but just let him manage, because he'll get them out of the mess that they're in. But his whole life is football, absolutely, totally football. And it's just one of those guys. I mean, I thought he did a fab job at Everton when you look at the players that he brought in and they sold on, etc. So he'll be fine. He'll be fine. I never worry about him. I spoke to him the other week. I can't remember. They'd just been beaten again somewhere. And he was apoplectic, but he's not got too much to worry about, has he?
Yeah, that's true. Hopefully the results from his perspective start to look up. And
yeah, well, in fairness to him, he is one of the good guys that people who know him will tell you he just is one of the good guys, but he is absolutely football mad.
Loves it. Mark, very finally, score prediction for Liverpool Wolves tonight in the Cup?
They're going to go through on pens.
Oh.
Who? Wolves?
No, but I think Liverpool, excuse me, I've got this hacking cough. I think Liverpool will go through on pens because basically I don't think they're that bothered about still being in the competition, because really they need to be Champions League, aren't they? So you know what will happen. They'll end up going on and winning it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, winning it tonight rather than winning
not the overall. Fair enough. Mark, great stuff as always. Thanks a million for joining us.
Pleasure.
Lovely stuff. 18 minutes past 8 on this Tuesday morning. OTB AM. That was Mark Lawrenson, the former Liverpool and Republic of Ireland international. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We're going to head to a quick ad break, and then we're back with the Irish reporter based in Melbourne, Catherine Murphy, who's been watching Andy Murray versus Matteo Berrettini at the Rod Laver Arena. Stick with us.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Zebo going on his own. He gets the try.
The Red 78.
We're both Munster people.
Nobody knows Munster rugby better.
Carberry gets over the line. Try from Munster.
Available every Wednesday. Don't miss a moment of action. Subscribe to the rugby channel on the OTB Sports app and turn on your notifications now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
19 minutes past 8 on this Tuesday morning's OTB AM. Delighted to have you with us between now and 10 o'clock with myself and Adrian. We're heading across now to Melbourne, Australia, live to the Irish reporter based in Melbourne, Catherine Murphy. Morning, evening, good night. Catherine, how are things?
Lovely to talk to you, Shane. How are you?
Keeping well, thanks. We've been glued to this screen, trying to talk on air around the Andy Murray win over Matteo Berrettini here. But as Adrian said this morning, I mean, when he lost the fourth set, you're thinking, well, that's it. The tiebreak, it's done for Murray because his body can't hack the fifth set. But he pushed on, and a dramatic win for Andy Murray this morning.
Unbelievable. I literally cannot believe what I've just watched, Shane. When he went 2 sets up, I'm not going to lie, and this is a terrible thing to say, I said to my camera up, we're outside, it's 38 degrees. After the bulletin, I said, that's going to go 5. It's just so Andy Murray for this to go more than 4 hours, and it's going to go 5 sets. And sure enough, it did. Now, I didn't know that he'd also add in, saving a match point, a super tiebreaker. I'm so happy for Andy Murray because he's worked so hard to get to this point. It's funny, the other day a photo popped up on my social media, a photo from 6 years ago. Andy Murray was one of the first really high-profile tennis players I ever interviewed, and he is an absolute gentleman on and off camera. He is so funny. He is so kind to everyone on the tour. He's so well liked. It's been such a journey for him when you consider where he's been. Right here in Melbourne in 2019, I was in the player tunnel when he played that infamous 5-setter against Roberto Bautista Agut, which he lost to the Spaniard because his hip was so bad at that point. He pretty much announced before the tournament that this might be his last, that he was looking like he was going to retire. And I remember looking down the tunnel and he couldn't even lift his bag up. He was grimacing with pain. But then when he came into the view of TV cameras and the audience, he kind of straightened up. He wanted his opponent to at least think he was okay to play. Then, of course, we had the retirement, but not really a retirement because he kind of changed his mind in the post-match interview. They played a big tribute to him and he was like, hang on, I might get surgery, I might come back. If someone told me that day that in 2023 I'd watch him play for almost 5 hours with a metal hip and defeat Matteo Berrettini, I just wouldn't have believed it. I can't believe what I've just seen.
It's pretty crazy, isn't it? I mean, 4 years after that 2019 Australian Open where you think this is it for Murray and he's still putting the crowd through 5-setters at Grand Slams. And a fan favourite there too, I'm sure, Catherine. I mean, it's a different atmosphere this year than the COVID years, of course, at the Australian Open. So I'm sure the crowd there were right behind him in the stadium.
They were going crazy. And can I give a shout out to the chair umpire, Mohamed Layani, and I really hope I'm pronouncing his name properly. I've never worked on any of his matches. He has this way of emphasizing every word. And when he said Murray, he said it real deep and the crowd started chanting along with him. I tried to count them all. There was at least 10 Scottish flags in the crowd. Then, of course, there's a huge Italian contingent in Melbourne and they were so vocal too. I feel like this 5-setter has really brought the Australian Open to life. Because last night on Rod Laver Arena, yesterday, I have to admit that we were all a little bit flat because Nick Kyrgios withdrew. It was so sudden, Shane. I was in the middle of a bulletin, a 10-minute bulletin. He actually withdrew and did his press conference within 10 minutes. We were all so disappointed. Then last night in Rod Laver Arena, Iga Swiatek, who's been so dominant, the world number one, she went through in straight sets. Daniel Medvedev only dropped 3 games against Marcus Giron of the US. So I think the Australian Open really needed this 5-setter and there's just such a buzz around the place this evening.
You mentioned about Murray, Catherine, limping after one of her matches in the most recent years. He seemed to be hobbling a small bit after this one as well. Just looking at the draw and how it stacks up, I've watched the Breakpoint documentary, so I'm suddenly an expert in Kokkinakis, and he's a high-ranked player, and Fognini, they're going to meet for the right to meet Murray in the next round. But having beaten a seed of Berrettini's ranking, the draw really opens up for him now.
It does open up for him, but this is the one thing that kills me with these Andy Murray matches. And that's why when he was 2 sets up, I was like, Andy, do it for your metal hip. For God's sake, can you just finish this one in 3? Because you want to see him be competitive in his next round. Now, you saw on TV, I was watching him really closely at the end. I think, this is just me sitting in my seat in the stadium, that he could barely walk up to his chair. He was so good. He was actually, do you notice, I don't know if they showed it on TV, he insisted on cleaning up his area so the ball kids wouldn't have to do it, like picking up all the water bottles off the floor. It took him ages, but he did look like he was almost struggling to walk. So I just hope that he recovers well. Tanasi Kokonakis is a really interesting one. It's so sad, as you know from Breakpoint, him and Nick Kyrgios won the doubles last year, and they just brought such an amazing energy to the whole tournament. Such a shame we won't get to see them in doubles, but that Fognini-Kokonakis match will be interesting. It's never dull with Fabio Fognini, that's for sure.
So just even the fact that Murray saved a match point in that game, just quite extraordinary. Just quickly, Kathleen, we're going to bring you a quick clip here of Murray speaking after the match, clearly delighted at his win.
I mean, I'll be feeling this evening and tomorrow, but right now I'm just, unbelievably happy, very proud of myself. I've put a lot of work into the last few months with my team who are here. To give me the opportunity to perform on stadiums like this and matches like this against players like Matteo, and it paid off tonight.
It's unbelievable, really, Catherine, isn't it? I mean, like the fact that he's battled for 5 hours out there on court with his metal hip against a player like Matteo Berrettini, who at 5-4 had the game at his mercy, and as I said, Murray saving a match point as well. So to put that in perspective, it's up there in recent years, certainly, with one of Murray's top moments.
It is. This is a match we will never forget. It's one of those moments where you're in Rod Laver Arena and you know what you're witnessing. It gives me goosebumps to hear him talk like that. He deserves this so much. And also in that post-match interview, because obviously the winning point was a let, he said, I got a bit lucky in the end. You work really hard to get that lucky. He's such a good guy. Don't you just love it when good guys have good things happen? So I can't help but just be so over the moon for him. I'll tell you, Shane, I often talk to the ball kids about who's their favourite player, because they obviously are behind the scenes and they interact with the players all the time. And by the way, they sign confidentiality agreements, so they can't say anything negative. But they always pick out Andy Murray and his brother Jamie as just good guys to deal with. So I'm just so happy for him.
I wonder where they'd rank Nick Kyrgios on that list. And it was the subject of my
next... They do love him.
Do they?
They do love him.
That was what I wanted to ask.
He's a superstar and he brings a vibe.
You didn't get a sense from the documentary. One thing I didn't get a full sense of from the documentary was his relationship with the Australian people. Was there universal disappointment that he was out from a being on his side point of view?
I'll give you my perspective of it, which is just one perspective. So I love Nick. I've known Nick for many years. He's always been great to deal with. I found him to be really good. You can only judge people on how you find them yourself. He's always been controversial and he is really polarizing. So to give you an example of how polarizing he is, I was doing a radio cross yesterday on a talkback show, and as I was speaking and talking of my disappointment and saying what a blow it was to the tournament, the text line on that radio show was lighting up with people saying, I won't miss him, he's a disgrace, all of that. And the presenter said to me, just so you know, this is the text line. But guess what? Those people would have still been watching him. He's so unpredictable. And you know what, Shane? I'm very grateful to him. He's made tennis more popular. He's brought bigger crowds to the tennis. I love the game. I want more people to love the game. I'm really happy that Netflix has given people an insight into the personalities, because even more so on the women's side of the draw, because Serena's gone and Ash Barty's gone, we need to get to know these players' stories more so that we can really buy into them and support them. So anything that makes tennis more popular, and Nick Kyrgios is king of that, I'll support it.
What are you hearing, Catherine, about the Djokovic injury or non-injury, this hamstring difficulty that we're hearing about? He's going for a golden year of Grand Slams. Is the reported injury as serious as people think, or is it just a non-story?
Do you know what? I'm afraid to even talk about it, because I can't help thinking, Shane, about last Friday night when we were all watching that exhibition match between Djokovic and Kyrgios, and we're all monitoring Djokovic to see how his hamstring is, and we're looking on the wrong side of the net. We had no idea that Nick Kyrgios had been struggling, that he was going to withdraw. I know the tournament organisers of the United Cup were completely blindsided when he pulled out. So with Djokovic, to me, he looks really happy. And you saw him in that exhibition dancing around. That's not, to me, someone who is concerned greatly about an injury. No doubt there is a twinge there. And I don't think Novak Djokovic, some players, they hide their twinges more. And I think with him, we always see it if he's injured. And Daniil Medvedev kind of alluded to that in the way he was almost kind of saying to Djokovic across the net, mimicking him, saying, you know, come on, you don't need to act up when you have a twinge. But who knows? I don't feel it's a huge problem. I really hope it's not a big problem, because it's been great to see him get a great reception here after what happened here 12 months ago. It's great that Melbourne and Australia has moved on from that.
Speaking of Melbourne and Australia moving on from, I mean, those COVID years, even last year's atmosphere at the tournament and around the city, Catherine, I'm sure it is in stark contrast to this year, where there's back to the party atmosphere and the carnival atmosphere. How do you compare this year's tournament in terms of atmosphere with recent years?
Do you know, there isn't even a comparison to last year, for example, because you know the way when you're in something, you don't realise that things are a bit weird. And of course, there was a cap on crowds for a lot of the tournament. But because there were so many fairy tale stories after what happened to Djokovic, which was a nightmare, you know, with Ash Barty, with the special Ks, it was a very special tournament. But it's now only that yesterday when the gates opened, and it was 100% capacity. It ended up being a record attendance here at the Australian Open. I think there was about 75,000 people here in Melbourne Park, and they're expecting a record for the tournament. Now, it'll be interesting to see if Nick Kyrgios' withdrawal affects that, because he's not the only withdrawal. The tournament's also without Roger Federer, who's retired, Ash Barty, Venus Williams withdrew, Ajla Tomljanovic, who is the top-ranked Australian female. And I think I can hear Tanasi Kokonakis going on to the court. Certainly no attendance issues in that stadium. It sounds like it's absolutely jam-packed. But there's no comparison. This is, I think, and I'm probably a little bit biased because I adore the place, but I think this is the best sports event in the world, without doubt. And I've been to the French Open, and it doesn't even compare to the Australian Open.
Catherine, we're looking at the draw then on both sides opening up. A few surprise results already, as we've already said. Berrettini last year semi-finalist getting knocked out, but already Rublev beating Dominic Thiem as well, 6-3, 6-4, 6-2. So some big names falling. Casper Ruud, I know, is out on court this morning around 9:15 a.m. or so Irish time, I think. And then on the women's side of the draw as well, Iga Swiatek, one of the favourites. It's fairly competitive on the women's side of the draw. How do you see both sides playing out? I suppose on the men's side, Djokovic is the man to beat.
Yeah, for sure. Djokovic is the overwhelming favourite to win his 10th title, and we know how he deals with adversity. We know that he loves to really come back. When you back him into a corner, he's a very dangerous person to meet in a draw. So he's absolutely the favourite. On the women's side of the draw, Iga Swiatek is so dominant. She's been dominant for so long. However, in the build-up to the Australian Open, she was playing in the United Cup for Poland, and they were taking on the US, and she got beaten by Jessica Pegula, the American. Now, Jessica Pegula is from a very famous family. They own the Buffalo Bills, for starters. I think they own some other sports teams in America. So from a very sporty background, she had played Iga Swiatek 4 times in 2022, and she never managed to beat her. Then she comes up with this massive win in the United Cup, an easy victory, straight set, 6-2, 6-2. Iga Swiatek, after that loss, what was most intriguing was she was sobbing under her towel. So she was asked in press, why were you so upset about this loss? And she said she felt helpless against Pegula. She felt like she just couldn't problem solve against her. She just felt like she was really outdone on that day. Now, I would keep my eye on Jessica Pegula. She had a really easy straight sets win yesterday, and she's determined to have a good run at the Australian Open. But then there's Ons Jabeur. You'll get to know her really well in the Netflix documentary. She's from Tunisia. She is so popular. She's been to 2 Grand Slam finals, and she revealed in a press conference yesterday that she has trophies on her phone that she wants to win this year. She wouldn't reveal which Grand Slam trophies, and it was Catherine Whittaker of the Tennis Podcast asked her that question. So she has big ambitions. She's so popular. She'd be a great story. But I just have a feeling about Jessica Pegula. Hope I haven't jinxed her, because I'm rarely right. So apologies to Jess.
Catherine, before we let go, I know you're laser focused on the tennis at the minute, but I did want to ask you about Eddie Jones. There's a couple of stories in some of the English papers today. The Telegraph saying revealed Jones' secret 14 months of Australia talks. This story just keeps on giving. And then in the Guardian, the RFU decided against inserting a clause in his severance package about talking to rivals for the World Cup for legal and moral reasons, so that the door was open to him. What's been I've asked you earlier on about the response, Nick Kyrgios, the response in Australia to the appointment of Eddie Jones on a 5-year contract?
I couldn't believe this yesterday morning. This story was so big that we move our sports bulletins out to the tennis, and I ended up leading with rugby, not tennis, on day one of the Australian Open. There's been a mixed response, but for the most part, a great response. Dave Rennie's a really good guy, I should say that, and there's always such a human side to this. I'm sure it was his dream to coach at a Rugby World Cup, and I hope him and his family are okay, because he was so lovely to deal with always. But Eddie Jones, I believe, is what Australia needs right now. Dave Rennie has a very different coaching style. Now, the big story will be this year in Australia is how the players cope with that change in coaching style. So Dave Rennie is the sort of guy that's all about love and connection. I'll play my guitar for you. You know, he would literally have a sing-song with the players. And then you hear the stories about Eddie Jones telling people, you know, to drink a cup of wet cement or sending cement to people's houses. There are many stories about how tough Eddie Jones is. So how they'll go from that affectionate love to very tough love is going to be interesting, but I'm relieved. I feel like it gives Australia a chance, and of course they could be on course to meet England in the quarter-final. And I've been speaking to some of the BBC journalists, and without stating the obvious, there's no way England want to face sacked Eddie Jones in charge of Australia. That would just be a prospect that they don't want to deal with, that's for sure.
For the rest of us, it better happen. It just better happen.
Yeah, we're licking our lips at that prospect.
It'd be so good. It would be so good. I am hoping and praying for that quarter-final, but the main thing I'm hoping and praying for is for Ireland to do well and make it past the quarter-final. That's my top priority. But second priority would be seeing that quarter-final matchup. It would be amazing.
100%. Will be absolutely brilliant. So the build up to the Rugby World Cup continues. Catherine, you've been brilliant with your time. Thanks a million as always. No doubt we'll check in again before the end of the Australian Open.
Pleasure. Love to talk to you anytime. Have a great day.
Great stuff. Catherine Murphy there, Irish journalist based in Melbourne, Australia, with ABC Sports. 8:39 AM approaching on this Tuesday morning's OTB AM. Just want to tell you about a brilliant charity event that's happening at Rascals Brewing Company in Shakor this coming Wednesday, January 18th, tomorrow. It's called Manawsome, celebrating the success of Irish women in sport. It's all to raise money for Women's Aid and will feature an array of brilliant speakers, including the World Cup bound Republic of Ireland defender Louise Quinn, Irish hockey legend Roisin Upton, former MMA champion Aisling Daly, and plenty more. And it'll all be hosted by our own Aisling O'Reilly. Tickets are just €20 and all proceeds go direct to Women's Aid. Go to rascalsbrewing.com to get your tickets now. Now, time for the papers. Yes, indeed. Time for the paper review. We might split up a couple of these papers. Adrian, I know you have a few over there.
Do you want me to just jump in?
Yeah, go on. Fire ahead.
You can grab away there. In the meantime, I'll fill a couple of seconds for you here, Shane.
Good man.
The Mirror is you're going, I'm staying. Klopp warns of Cop summer Clear out, but says, I won't quit unless I'm told to. That should be music to Liverpool fans' ears, I would think, today, that if they're going to have a bit of a clear out, and you would assume bring some players in, and the Klopp is hanging around. Top duo and Andy plans, Johnny Sexton, Tyke Furling remain on course to make Ireland Six Nations / Wales on the 4th of February, and battering Ram Richarlison hits back at kicked keeper. You disrespected us. It felt like, I mean, there's been a bit of defence of Richarlison since the game, that, you know, he was just so passionately defending his people. It sort of felt a bit like he was been the pantomime hero at the end of that.
The Ramsdale stuff.
Yeah, like there was no need for him to get involved.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, but particularly the stuff at the end, like what was he getting involved for? He I think has some role to play. The fan was an idiot, and the fan should be banned and kicked out for whatever length of time they get kicked out for. But I think there's a response to whatever Richarlison is doing, which, like,
do you know when a player comes off the bench and they feel like they haven't had an impact on the game? Sometimes they overcompensate by getting involved in little bits and bobs. That was my take on. But Richarlison certainly giving it loads in front of the home fans. Back at the Times as well here. Arsenal want £80 million Rice, an exclusive by Gary Jacob. Arsenal have made Declan Rice their top target this summer and are growing increasingly confident that they can beat Chelsea to the England midfielder's signature. Where have I seen this story before? Michaela Mudryk.
Do you think that they're maybe after, it's like an old switcheroo here, that Arsenal are actually after somebody else?
Well,
and they're just lobbing this out
they're
there.
They're playing chess.
Yeah.
And everyone else is playing checkers. Jesus, yeah, that could be a point. But Declan Rice, 24, centre of a bidding war. We'll see how that plays out. We've got Coco Gauff on the back as well next for Emma Raducanu. That's tomorrow morning, I think, down in the Australian Open. I'm not leaving, it says Klopp. And England's defence coach Kevin Sinfield has held talks with Owen Farrell about improving the fly half's tackle technique. So 31-year-old Owen Farrell learning how to tackle.
Was that a dig?
It was. A dig, yeah.
Proud Australia, Jones targets World Cup glories. More on all of that down there. Sexton back training as Byrne gets support for Ireland selection. I kind of feel as if we'll be putting back to this headline potentially in, what would it be, 6, 7, 8 months time, when a World Cup squad gets named and Ross Byrne is suddenly in there. He certainly doesn't know himself no harm from the boot. He's, as I've said, World Cup standard from the boot, and maybe he's got more to offer as well. And Jones' return makes World Cup even more interesting, writes Jerry Thornley. Back
page of the Irish Daily Mail here as well. Rice on menu. Arsenal chase West Ham star and club record summer deal. We've got here's Johnny, Ireland captain back in blue, Johnny Sexton, and at the bottom there, the story we mentioned at the top of the show, Clifford maybe asked to apologise for speech. Paulie Clifford write a letter. There is precedent for that, apparently, writing the referees. It's a bit of a mad one. I don't know what will come from that, but maybe something will.
I'll do two together here, the Guardian and the Telegraph. The Guardian, Arsenal hoping to beat Chelsea and United to Rice's signature. I really feel as if we haven't seen the last of that one play out. And RFU gave Jones the green light to join World Cup rivals Australia on the legal and moral grounds. They said it was the right thing to do. And then the Telegraph is sort of the same. Revealed Jones' secret of 14 months of Australia talks. I mean, that definitely begs more questions than it answers. And Arsenal planning 70 million, it says here, £70 million summer swoop for Rice.
Last couple from myself as well, a couple of the tabloids. The Sun, Aaron's disrespect. Richarlison branded Arsenal keeper Aaron Ramsdale disrespectful for celebrating in front of the Tottenham fans. Chiadozi wanted, if Oba's out, Swansea City wanting Chiadozi Ogbenya to replace Michael Obafemi. And then we've got the Declan Rice to Arsenal rumours, and Marcus Rashford. United in talks with him over a new £300,000 a week 5-year contract. While the back page of the Irish Daily Star has that Aaron Ramsdale Richarlison stuff as well. Paulie Clifford saying, I wish we could bottle this feeling. GA President Lanny McCarthy saying there are no current plans to look at the structures of local championships, with Kerry intermediate and junior clubs dominating at national level. And Klopp staying to oversee Clara. They of course play Wolves in the FA Cup replay tonight. Cathal Malani, Sligo's own, welcome to the show. Good morning.
Good morning, lads. How's it going?
Keeping well. I don't know if that's a story we mentioned in the post-show meeting yesterday, the fact that Kerry clubs are so dominant at junior and intermediate level. Like, is there something that has to be done there? I know the structures in each county are different in terms of the number of teams in senior, intermediate and junior, but I mean, the fact that Kerry clubs have won 11 of the 22 Junior All-Ireland finals is pretty stark. I don't know what they need to do to change it.
Does it mean that there's just a good standard at that? Because the chat about the two lads, obviously, the Cliffords, that, you know, they've no place in junior football. If they had that much of an influence on the team, they wouldn't be playing junior football. They'd have gone up to intermediate and they've gone up to senior long before now. I mean, I do take the point that obviously they stand out, but they've risen up a level now on the basis of the wins. But I don't know. What is he saying? That they will look at it?
You see, I get, isn't it in certain counties the number of teams in each? So say Fossa are the, as Nathan was saying to us yesterday, like the 18th best team in Kerry. if you have 8 teams in senior and 8 teams in intermediate, Fossa will fall into the junior section, whereas some counties have 10, 10, 10 or 12, whatever. So that Fossa would never land.
But I also suspect that 18th team in Kerry is way better than the 18th team at a similarly populated county somewhere else, because of the focus they have in GAA.
Exactly.
Yeah. But the problem is maybe they're playing the 22nd, 23rd, 24th best team in Cork or in Laois or wherever. Do you know that maybe it's not equally?
Yeah, it's a
split.
difficult one, because you have to give counties their own independence, because there's such a difference in various counties in terms of just the number of clubs, first of all. In some of the smaller counties compared to the bigger ones, it's very hard to streamline it from central level. And as Adrian points out, and there was a point that was made in some of the papers as well, that even if everyone was equal, Kerry's clubs would probably be strong anyway, because they've got such a great tradition and heritage in football.
And it's not as if like they beat Stewartstown by, what was it in the end?
3 points.
That's not a hammering. I was at the Crokes Kearns O'Reilly's game the other week. That was not a hammering. It's not like
and they're a super club as well.
Get out of it. And the Kerry team were beaten. I mean, it's not like these are not like handing out steamrollings left, right, and centre.
No, I think it probably will be looked at, but that doesn't mean that it'll change anything.
What can you do?
What can you do?
Just looking, so Kerry clubs have won 7 out of 19 All-Ireland Intermediate club football crowns. They're 4 clear of Tyrone in second place with 3, and then it's Morstark for junior level, Kerry landing 11 out of 21 titles, 50% strike rate, and you've Galway, Cork and Meath next on 2.
But sure, they've won like a hatful of All-Irelands at senior level. Does that mean that you need to I mean, you might have to re-look at the senior inter-county football for different reasons, but do you know what I mean? Like, just because like they're one of, are they the most winning county in Ireland in terms of All Irelands? They probably are.
You see, it's but like it's in senior. The grades are equal in terms of the number of teams in senior across the country. To my knowledge, it's just an intermediate and junior where
that's
different
the
counties
same
do
number of
differently.
Senior clubs in every county.
Well, like they're saying here, for example, at senior level, where the playing field is level, Kerry are 4th in the Roll of Honour with All Ireland club titles. They've got 6. Cork clubs have 11, Dublin 8, and Galway 7.
The same number of senior clubs in every county.
I think what the best team in each county comes out. It's not necessarily that there's the same number of teams in each senior championship. For example, I think Mayo has something like 16 clubs in their senior championship, and Sligo has 10. Leitrim would have probably 10 as well, or 12. Like, you couldn't really ask, like, Kerry has quite a lot of clubs, but they've got divisional teams as well, which you've also got to remember.
Oh, sure, look at it.
So I mean, that's a totally different ballgame.
Does Fuss's success have an impact on those divisional teams?
I think it's only if you're a senior club that you...
So if they were to get senior, then the 2 lads would come out
I
of
think
East
so,
Kerry.
yeah, I think so. So I think James O'Donoghue's club possibly have... Did they get promotion back up to senior? Possibly again. I'm just thinking off the top of my head there, but the divisional teams are a totally different layer to everything, and you have to respect the tradition of a county when they do have divisional teams. And Kerry would say, I'm sure if you ask them, that the divisional teams are a huge part of spotting players like the Cliffords who get a chance to play in the senior championship. Obviously they probably would have been spotted anyway, but I'm sure there were other players you could point to that may have gone under the radar a bit if they were just playing with their own local club.
Well, it's pointed out here in the Star. So Kerry have just 8 senior clubs, meaning that their intermediate champions tend to be very strong, and by default their junior champions tend to be very strong. No county has fewer senior clubs than Kerry, with between 12 and 16 the norm. Last year's Tyrone Championship in the senior had 16 teams. So I guess what they're asking the GAA to do is intervene, have a minimum number of teams that have to compete in senior, which would have a knock-on effect
that's
to
very
intermediate
clear
and junior.
now. And that seems actually quite reasonable.
Yeah, well, it makes sense.
Like if that county with that success and that history and legacy and tradition, they would have no problem fulfilling a couple of more senior teams.
100%. 8 senior teams seems low.
That's including the divisional teams, isn't it?
Yeah. Whereas most counties have between 12 and 16. So that's where I guess where the strong intermediate and junior teams from Kerry come from. As you say, there's no guarantee that means the Kerry teams won't still keep winning, because they're strong regardless. But I mean, it would at least level the playing field a little bit, maybe at intermediate and junior level. A bit like the senior, you don't know what county is going to lift the senior title.
Kerry horism is what we're saying here. They've rigged the system.
100%.
Is that what we're saying?
They know what they're at. The Rathmore lads and the lads down in Fossa. Of course, it's going to be a Derry team winning the All Ireland Senior Club Championship this year, Adrian, isn't it?
Is it?
I've backed Len from the very outset.
Oh, you have. You're on that train sort of big time.
They'll have me.
When you get your comeuppance now on Sunday, Shane, when you're down there with your Malachi O'Rourke.
Malachi Clerkin's great as well.
He is great, but that could be an unusual sign to bring to a game.
He'll be up in the press box as I hold up a banner towards him. Malachi O'Rourke. I'll certainly have a banner ready to go for him on Monday morning.
Are you going to it?
I might be going to it. I'm undecided yet. I have to see what my soccer schedule is for Monaghan Town FC.
And you go supporting Glen?
Of course, yeah. You stick with the Ulster teams, do you know?
You support Ulster Rugby, like?
Yeah, exactly.
The same way?
Yeah, 100%. Tommy Bowser, North Monaghan man like myself. There's a great pedigree there. You were out in the office there watching the tennis unfold, Cal?
Very lucky because when I came in, Murray I think he just won the second set at that stage, so I've caught a good bit of the match, and what a game. Unbelievable match. And I don't know how he survived the match point in the fifth where Berrettini had what looked like a routine chance to finish the match off, and he just couldn't do it, and Murray bounced back. The demeanour of Murray, he just looks very kind of exhausted all the time, I think, when he's playing the match, so I thought he was kind of flagging a little bit energy-wise, but he did brilliantly to win the tie-break. And given all the injury trouble that he's had, and everyone thought that he was going to retire, the fact that he's pulled this off against Berrettini, who I think is the 13th seed, is quite a significant win. But if there's a better game than that over the next couple of weeks, we'll be doing very well.
Absolutely. Cal, great stuff as always. Thanks for popping into us. Cal Milani there, of course, from the Sports News. We have a bit of a special piece now, because Newcastle United are one of those clubs that we haven't quite covered in depth, the same as maybe Arsenal, United, Liverpool over recent weeks. Delighted to say the former Irish international goalkeeper Shay Given joins us on the line this morning. Morning, Shay, how are things?
Good morning, lads. You okay?
Keeping well. Thanks for coming on to us. 354 caps for Newcastle, so we figured you'd be the right man to discuss their current form and rise with. Things are going really well for Eddie Howe, third place in the table. It's all looking up.
Yeah, it's been an unbelievable season. You think of the last 12 months even, Shane, it's been remarkable. Where they've come from. I think they were second bottom when he took over. And I think the biggest scare, the biggest problem for everyone connected to Newcastle or played for Newcastle or any connection with the club was, stay in the division, because the championship's so difficult to get out of. And the job he's done, the recruitment, I think last January and the summer has been phenomenal. Not went mental in the market, just got the right people and the right mentality, the right sort of character to the football club, and it's just snowballed really. The season they're having, third in the league. And you're right to talk about them, and maybe not in the title race, but definitely in the Champions League places. If they can finish in the top four and perhaps win a League Cup, then it would be an unbelievable season.
Do you think they are? Like, I was listening to Gary Neville's podcast after the match at the weekend, and he was kind of saying he believes City will win the league, Manchester United might finish second, Arsenal third, Newcastle fourth. Is there any hope that Newcastle can get involved in this title race?
I think Eddie would probably, I don't know, probably quietly maybe think there's an outside chance, but I think Arsenal looks so good at the minute. Gary Neville may be saying that to try and mount more pressure on Arsenal perhaps, or maybe take the pressure off Arsenal. I don't know what his psychology is, but after watching Arsenal at the weekend, they were brilliant against Tottenham. Of course, they've got to play Man City twice yet, which will be massive games, of course, but Arsenal, I don't think will fear anyone at the minute the way they're playing. They've been absolutely brilliant. Their confidence is sky high. The club, the fans, everyone's right behind them. So I think it'll be very difficult to claw that back. And whatever reason, at City, it seems to be not going so good at the minute. There seems to be something missing, a little spark, whatever it might be. But Newcastle, even if they finish fourth, the Gary Neville's prediction's right, and Newcastle finish fourth, that would be just a brilliant season. It really would. And then, rebuild again perhaps in the summer, a few more players, not loads of rebuilding, just one or two players to add to this group of players and help strengthen this team. And it's very exciting. I think the biggest thing that Newcastle fans have is hope again. There's a real optimism around the city that the good times are ahead again, and hopefully that's the case.
Shay, you touched on the quality of the signings, and none of them are like monster names necessarily that were hugely sought after by some of the bigger clubs. You spent about 200 million quid. The names have been monster successes. Having said that, the likes of Gomeres, Trippier, Nick Pope, of course, Dan Byrne, the list goes on, and we've spent plenty of time in this show talking about the source of where that money has come from. Having said that, there are other clubs with just as deep a pockets who spent the money badly. In that context, will you talk to us a bit about Howe's role in the transfers, and where would you rate him at the minute in terms of Premier League managers?
Well, he's got to be up there. People said at the start he's just maybe be a stopgap, or maybe just for some big name manager to come in, but I think in any conversation now, I think Eddie Howe's a big name manager. I think the job he's done, he's surpassed probably most expectations, even of the owners. I wouldn't have thought that. I think the Tottenham game, the very first game they were in charge was Tottenham at home, and they got beat. I was actually at the game. It was the atmosphere before the game was phenomenal, but there was a realization after the game that there's a big rebuilding job to do here, and they've done that. They've backed him, of course, and I think Eddie Howe is he deserves this sort of the positive stuff that's said about him, because you can only talk about second bottom and now third in the league, and that's after a long period of time. So you just hope that can continue. I kind of sort of hinted the other day that maybe they could dip into the market now in January, because the position they're in, to be third in the league now, it doesn't guarantee in 12 months' time they'll be third in the league, because they always say strike when the iron's hot. Maybe now's the time to get one or two players through the door to really sort of cement the top four position, because the job for Dan Ashworth and Eddie Howe come the summertime will be made a lot easier if you're in the Champions League next season.
You're hearing a lot of names being linked, Shay, as will be the case with Newcastle over the coming years. But the Chelsea trio, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Conor Gallagher, Hakim Ziyech, maybe Ziyech being the one that Chelsea might most willingly part with. Scott McTominay is another name as well. I guess when you see Bruno Guimaraes leaving the field in tears after twisting his ankle at the weekend, it highlights the need for maybe some building in central midfield, albeit I think his injury isn't maybe as bad as first feared. It could be weeks as opposed to months. Who do you think they should bring in, or what sort of areas of the pitch would you like to see Eddie Howe strengthen?
Well, when you first seen the Bruno injury, you thought it was going to be a lot more serious, and hopefully, as you're right, the reports coming back that's hopefully only weeks and not months that he's going to be out for, because he's such an important player. He's been an absolute inspirational signing, should we say, as well from day one, and he's a fan's favourite already. So hopefully it's not long term. But where would you like to strengthen? Probably in midfield. When you see, I think. Probably the Sheffield Wednesday game when they lost in the FA Cup was one of them ones you thought, is the squad is good enough to be a Champions League squad, perhaps even for next season, or this home straight the second half of the season, an extra couple of players could help strengthen the squad, because when they made, I think it was 8 changes against Sheffield Wednesday, it looked like it showed a bit. There's a lot of players who have not played much football, and I think the squad in depth might not be there as maybe some of the bigger teams in the top four are challenging for the top four. So I wouldn't say exact positions, I think the back four have been brilliant, the goalkeeper's been amazing, so probably midfield and maybe higher up the pitch perhaps, but you don't want to rock the boat too much when you're doing so well as well. It's a fine sort of balance to get that right. Do we leave it how it is because we're doing so well, or do we add a little bit of competition for places?
I guess the desire for a trophy, Shay, in Newcastle, I mean, as you well know, it's a town that loves its football. In the Toto Cup in 2006, and before that you had the FA Cup in 1955, so it's not a club that has experienced much success in the way of silverware. Into the Carabao Cup semi-finals now, is that something that's going to be firmly on Eddie Howe's mind, that look, it would be a lovely season, not only to clinch top four but maybe pick up a Carabao Cup trophy as well? Yeah, I mean, that'd be amazing. I mean, I was at the quarter-final there, the last game, and the atmosphere before and after the game actually was phenomenal against Leicester. So obviously, Southampton's a draw, you would think, in the semi-final, home and away. I think the second leg's at St James's Park as well. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy, because Southampton, obviously, the recent results in recent weeks have picked up. But you would like to think that Newcastle will have enough to get through that. And then, obviously, final, anyone can win a final, can't they? It's a bit of luck on the day. But it's exciting times again. As I said, the crowd are really behind the team and the manager, and there's a real buzz in the city. So it would be amazing. It would be an unbelievable season, top four, and to pick up a trophy. As you say, it's been far too long. I mean, I was there for nearly 12 years of my life, and every year was the same thing. Can we win a trophy? Can we finally do it? We got to 2 FA Cup finals, I think a semi-final, a UEFA Cup as well, I think it was, or whatever it was called. They changed the name all the time. But, we were close, but we just didn't get our hands on one. So it's very frustrating. But you just think with this crop of players, with the new ownership, with the backing that hopefully Eddie will get, then hopefully it's not a million miles away.
Speaking of the new ownership, Shay, and you're obviously out and around the club and you're in touch, I'm sure, with a lot of Newcastle fans. There was so much chat about it at the start, and the source of the money, and how should we feel about this, I suppose. Is everybody around Newcastle just, the money's there, the new owners are in, we're getting on with this and we're going to win trophies, or is there any chat about the source of the money?
Well, I don't live in Newcastle, but I don't know. I mean, there's always going to be people who will object to it. I mean, but there's other clubs in the Premier League that have got money from places maybe they shouldn't have before. I don't want to go into too much depth on it, but I think that what's happened with the previous ownership, I think they're just excited that there's someone who's up to, who are prepared to back the team, prepared to try and get the club challenging again at the top of the league. So whatever you say on here, or any sort of social, or any sort of media, then people will spin it and say you're whatever. I can't really say the words, but there's always going to be, objections to that, but I mean, personally, on a footballing point of view and a sporting point of view, I think it's, and again, people will spin this whatever way they want as well. It's exciting again for the football club. I say it's been doom and gloom for a long, 12, 13 years under the previous ownership, and it seems now that sort of cloud's been lifted and there's excitement again through the city.
You almost feel, Shay, that there's a bit of a shift around Newcastle, even in terms of big teams. Luck seems to follow them around, and the Mitrovic penalty at the weekend was a perfect example of that, where you need a moment to kind of go your way to pick up 3 points. And even towards the end of the game, I remember back in August when Liverpool got the late goal and Newcastle were trying to kind of play out the game and run down the clock. It's a risk. But at the weekend, that little bit of shithousery where, Dan Byrne is holding the ball over his head for the Fulham players trying to swipe it out of his hands. All of a sudden, all these little moments are going Newcastle's direction.
Well, if you stood next to Dan Byrne, you do well to get a ball off his hands. He's 6'7", so need a step ladder, I think. But yeah, I mean, you're probably right when you say about the Mitrovic penalty at the weekend. It was just one of those unfortunate things for probably Mitrovic. But you think at times, I tweeted after the game, something's brewed in Newcastle, because there's little moments in seasons where things like that happen, because if Fulham get their noses in front, 1-0, they probably sit more defensively and be more difficult to break down, and that the goal might not have come at the end, and that goal would have been just for 1 point instead of 3 points as well. So you just believe that there's little moments, key moments, as you say, call it a bit of luck, call it whatever you want. But it's still a long way to go. I mean, we get excited because they've been there now for a few weeks, but there's a lot of games to play. There's a lot of big matches that come up, a lot of big teams to play against. So there's a lot of football still to be played, and there's a lot of stories to be told yet, so it's not over yet. There's a long way to go.
There was a big debate in the studio, Shay, before we came on air this morning about who was the best goalkeeper at Newcastle since Shay Given, and whether or not it was Nick Pope. We might as well, you're the expert in the area.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's opinion in different eras and what have you, but what you would say about Nick Pope, he's just been, a breath of fresh air to the football club. I think was it 10, maybe 11 million they got, and sort of seemed to go under the radar as well, Adrian, with a lot of people. He just sort of slipped through the door and okay, he's here now, and there wasn't so much fuss made about him. And then he's just been absolutely phenomenal. His record, I think I've seen somewhere 11 Premier League goals they've conceded all season, or something along them. I don't quote me on the exact number, but that record with the back four. You look at the back four: Dan Byrne, Botman's been a brilliant sign. Of course, Cher looks a different player under Eddie Howe, and of course Trippier. You mentioned before about his leadership qualities. He's a captain. He's just, I think, the first signing as well under the new owners as well. He's brought so much to the football club. So I think then back four and back five, with Nick Pope's been absolutely superb. And I think you need that base if you're going to do anything, in the Premier League, and they've definitely got that.
Yeah, 5th clean sheet in a row, I think, for Nick Pope, which is a record at top flight level, which is not bad at all.
I'll get me coat then.
No, not bad. Alexander Isak, another name as well, Shay, that's really popped up, and his game time, has been limited by injuries, but his strike rate in terms of goals, I think it's a goal every 89 minutes that he's been in a Newcastle jersey when he has been on the pitch. So really, really big bright spark.
Yeah. I was at his debut actually at Anfield when he scored 2 and possibly could have had a hat-trick because there was a marginal big toe was offside or something, and one of the goals got disallowed, in the second half. But yeah, I mean, he had a bad injury, and he's as Eddie says, in the last couple of weeks, he's just trying to get him back up to speed. Of course, the goal at the weekend will do him no harm at all, or his confidence no harm either, But again, it's exciting. Wilson's playing really well at the minute as well, and some people are talking, could Wilson and Isak play together up front? That would be, we don't see that very often, 2 strikers, but maybe Eddie might change his formation a little bit, perhaps with maybe Bruno missing for a couple of weeks. It might give him that option to play both of them. I don't know, but it's exciting. He's we didn't know much about him before he signed, but we certainly knew a lot about him after his debut. He looked very sharp. He looks a finisher as well, and looks a natural finisher too. So, I'm looking forward to seeing him play in the coming weeks.
And he's maybe capitalising on a slight dip in form for Alan Saint-Maximin, someone who we know is extremely talented, but he's really jumped on that bandwagon, Isak, when Saint-Maximin hasn't maybe been at his best.
Yeah, perhaps, and I think Saint-Maximin's been fit now for the last 3 or 4 weeks as well, and not really getting the game time, so I don't know, maybe if he's, you don't know, obviously you're just speculating from outside the sort of changing room and what have you, but you would thought he would have got more football. And as I say, you said with Bruno missing the next couple of weeks, it might be interesting to see how Eddie sort of reshuffles his pack. We'll see Maximum come in. Will Isak start up with Wilson? There's lots of different, things that he has to sort of work out now, Eddie, in the next couple of weeks. But say Maximum on his day can be world class, and then on other days he can be frustrating. I think that's the thing, is trying to get the consistency. What St. Maximum's going to turn up. But when he can play at the level we know he can, he's a brilliant player. Marcus Rashford definitely offside. Oh my God! Don't get me started now. How long have I got in this show? I've got all morning if you want, lads. To be honest, I just can't get my head around that goal, and I spoke about it in the last couple of days as well. And people going, "Oh, because you played for Man City, blah 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 blah." It's nothing to do with Man City. It's nothing to do with if a Newcastle striker had scored it or Haaland had scored it. I'd be saying the exact same. It makes a farce of the whole game. In fact, it's just. I don't know what it's probably been spoke about. He's interfering with plays, not interfering. Of course, he's interfering with play. Ederson's the goalkeeper. Position I know pretty well. I'd like to think was coming out down the line of the shot with Rashford running onto the ball. He was getting set for that. He wasn't getting set for Bruno Guimaraes. Fernandes coming onto the ball to finish the goal. And then they say he's not interfering because he's not touched the ball. He's nearly jumped out of the way for Bruno to score. So. Of course he's interfering with play. Of course he's interfering even with the back line. Kanji sort of stepping up, playing him offside. It's a bit of a farce. I mean, they have to clarify. I know there's a law in place, and if you don't touch the ball and what have you. I think even go back a few weeks when Salah scored for Liverpool. It's a different goal. It's not a City man. It's not a goal against Man City or Newcastle, for example. I think the Wolves defender headed it because he was trying to block it from going to Salah. Goes to Salah and he scores and they give it. That's a farce. That goal should be given offside.
What do you make of Man City, generally speaking, at the minute, Shay? Because, result notwithstanding, the performance was okay. Fred really clearly had a job to do on Kevin De Bruyne, which he did quite well in the first half. Haaland didn't have much. He probably needs the City players to get the ball to him more, although it was quite difficult at Old Trafford at the weekend, given United's setup. But you wouldn't be too concerned. Arsenal's form is really, really good, but you feel that City have that bubble and that spell still in them.
Well, they do. They're champions for a reason, and these guys have been there before. They're a brilliant squad of players, and they'll be hurting at the minute because the results. Southampton, of course, losing to Southampton in the League Cup as well, and then going out losing the Manchester Derby. So these guys will be hurting, and you'll expect a response. Fred done a brilliant job on De Bruyne. I was at the game, actually, the Brentford game before the World Cup when Thomas Frank went to the Etihad and really, I think they nearly double marked De Bruyne that day to try and stop the service to Haaland, and there was a real game plan to, if you can stop the source, then you stop Haaland getting goals, So, Pep and his staff will have to work that out. How do we maybe free up De Bruyne, or if a couple of players are on De Bruyne, is there space for the likes of Mahrez or Grealish or Foden or whoever else that he plays, or Silva or whatever team he picks, So they'll have to rejig it a bit perhaps to get the spark back. But I think, as I said, these guys are champions for a reason. They've won the Premier League so many times in the last 5 or 6 seasons, so they definitely won't be giving up the ghost, should we say. They'll be definitely chasing Arsenal all the way to the end.
I saw Stuart Pearce making a good case, and it was stood out from the noise in defence of Hugo Lloris on TalkSport yesterday in the North London Derby, talking about the fact that it takes a deflection. What's your take on it?
Yeah, it does take a deflection. It's difficult because any goal that goes in and a goalkeeper hits his chest or whatever and it rebounds into the net, then it's, people will just automatically point the finger at the goalkeeper. And also it doesn't help, and this doesn't sound like a goal. It's going to be a goalkeepers union conversation, but it's like, it's happened so quick, and then when they show it, it's a split second type thing, and sometimes you don't even see the ball and it hits off a part of your body, and before you know it, it's in the net. You don't even realise which part of your body it's hit or nothing. It happens so quick. And the thing with TV and slow motions and stuff, and people are sitting back on their sofa and thinking, "Gee, I would have saved that." It's just, it's not easy. I'm not saying I'm not saying he shouldn't have saved it. I'm not saying it's a glaring error, but you'll be disappointed when you look back. Hugo will be disappointed himself. If he stays maybe more square to the ball, it might hit his chest and come back in the direction it came, and he's just turned his chest a little bit, and that's gone into the net. But it happens so quick, and it's milliseconds or whatever it is. It's very difficult to react sometimes. And it's like hard for keepers as well, isn't it? Because you're like, that's the ultimate. A defender makes a slip and it's grand. It probably gets covered. Somebody else mops it up. Goalkeeper makes a slip and he's living with that. He's listening to that. He's looking at that for the next couple of weeks. And again, it's a big derby as well, so there's a big pressure in that position. Of course, the goalkeepers as you say, is the last line of defence. There's no one there to bail you out behind. And being there myself, I've made mistakes. It's not a nice place to be. But again, it's the psychology of a goalkeeper. The sports psychologists, I'm sure they have at Tottenham, and different people who've been working with Hugo Lloris you've got to park that to one side, of course, for the rest of the game, and then maybe after the game you can address it, sit down in the cold light of day and think, what would you have done different, and how could you have maybe reacted differently, or what would you have done differently perhaps the next time, So it's all dealing with the mental side of the game as much as anything.
Having said all that, with my Irish hat on, I'll make a case for Caoimhin Kelleher to get out of Liverpool, who are going backwards, and good time to jump ship and a good place for him to go. What's your sense of what, if you were to give him advice, if he was to call you up and say, Shay, what are you thinking, what should I do here, what would you say to him?
Yeah, well, I think Caoimhin doesn't need advice from me or anyone else, but I would always be the opinion of to get playing. Obviously, that would be my. I left Donegal all those years ago at 16 and had a choice of going to Man United or Glasgow Celtic, and I picked Glasgow Celtic because I felt there was a better chance of getting into the team. Packy Bonner was getting on a bit. Hopefully, Packy's not watching, but at the time I felt he was more of a chance of getting in there. Whereas Peter Schmeichel was just sort of coming into his prime at Man United, so we felt that. Me and my dad felt that was the avenue we wanted to take. We wanted to play as many first team games as possible, and I always felt when I didn't play, even if it was in the squad and I was on the bench or whatever, I was raging. I was like, that's a game I will never get back in my life, in my career. That I can't turn the clock back. So Caoimhin will be, I would imagine, be itching to get playing. And even from a Liverpool point of view, Alisson's an unbelievable goalkeeper. So I always have the argument, because I've been asked this a few times of a few different people, is like, there's no harm in letting him go to the end of the season, for example, now to play games, and that's, even puts up his price tag, for example, because I've got every faith that he would do brilliant wherever he goes. He's at the age, he's at the level where he could play, I think, in, I wouldn't even just say Championship, I would say, Premier League. I think he's at that level. And of course, Gavin's doing great at Southampton as well. So, Caoimhin will be looking at that thinking, I need to get playing games, So I think there could be some sort of a good deal for both Liverpool and Caoimhin to get him some game time.
It's fascinating what you're saying there, Shay, about the psychology of a goalkeeper, because you're in a team sport and yet you're an individual really in that team, because as you say, if a mistake is on your back, it's entirely down to you. Like we had Ronan O'Gara recently with us, and look, kind of similar for a fly half in rugby, that you're in a team sport, but again you're an individual, especially when you're on the kicking tee. And Ronan, he made my morning when he said Ronnie O'Sullivan was one of his sports heroes, and he was big into the darts as well. It seemed fascinating to me that he was gravitating towards individual sports and even maybe golfers as well. Are you someone similar who has maybe as a goalkeeper gravitated towards individual sports people?
Well, I do like golf. I like the golfers, to be fair. Obviously the Irish guys, McIlroy and Shane Lowry, who I met a few weeks back, actually, great guy. You just hope he has a great year ahead of him, of course. But growing up probably was more of football. I was growing up as a kid and was always like, who do you look up to as a footballer? And Peter Schmeichel was probably the one I looked up to most when I was a kid. And it was kind of like, who could you learn from, or who do you think you could emulate to try and be, or have some sort of a figure that you could look at and think, well, what do I need to do to get to that level, or to even, be anywhere close to that level, So I think it's good for kids to have that sort of aspirations, or it doesn't have to be even in their sport, or individuals, I don't know, I was trying to say inspirations that people, dedication, and people who sometimes maybe weren't the most gifted in their sport, but they've just thrown their whole life and into it, and they've actually been brilliant at what they've done, and that's, what is it, hard work beats talent or something, or there's a saying in there somewhere, lads, you'll probably help me out, but it's something for kids to aspire to be, and that's what I was like when I was growing up. It was like, I used to look at maybe all the top goalkeepers, but probably Peter Schmeichel was the one I thought, what an unbelievable goalkeeper he was. And lucky enough at one stage, he was at the other end of the pitch to me, playing against him, so that was a bit surreal. But I think it's important you look up to these people.
Just a final one for me, Shay, and you've been very good with your time. The Aaron Ramsdale situation at the weekend, brilliant performance in the North London derby from him. There were those unsavoury scenes towards the end where a Spurs fan kicks him in the back, and you can see him kind of having a little bit of aggro with the Spurs fans throughout the game. Like, is that a tough thing, and maybe from your own experience as well, where you're standing in your goal and you have the opposition fans right behind you hurling abuse at you for 90 minutes plus? Not an easy thing, and probably, I assume, quite difficult for a goalkeeper not to react to that kind of thing.
Yeah, as you say, you'll be getting abused the whole game. I've played it, obviously, Manchester derby, the Newcastle, Sunderland derbies. You at away, especially at the away stadiums, you're getting, it's 90, 95 minutes of absolutely, whatever they can throw at you. You can't stay on here, of course. The stuff that Ramsdale would have had to put up with at the weekend, but when you win a big derby, I think you should be allowed as a player to enjoy that moment. That's why you work hard and you dedicate yourself and your life to the profession. Is to celebrate the moment and enjoy the moment. So I think for a fan to come on like that is disgusting, really. He kicked him in the back, which is bad enough. But imagine he had a knife or something or anything. It's some Tottenham fans are like, oh, you're going over the top there, perhaps. But at the same time, these guys, they're family men, they've got kids and stuff, and it's people's lives is risk, and that might be a bit strong on my point, but you just don't know in the current climate. If someone has something that they shouldn't have into the stadium, then the players on the pitch should not be at any sort of risk, so you don't like to see that at any stadium.
Yeah, 100%. Here. Shay, really good at your time. Thanks a million as always this morning.
Thanks, Shay.
All right, thanks, guys.
Great stuff. Shay Given there, former Republic of Ireland international goalkeeper, of course. Fascinating stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so interesting. And been there, done that. Like, bought the T-shirt.
Literally.
Who's the best goalkeeper has been since he very politically.
None of them.
Fair play to him.
Yeah. To be fair.
Well, he would have been very close with Steve Harper at that time as well, because he would have been his understudy for a long period of time before Shay went off to join City. So, of course. I think you can't really legitimately get into a debate about that.
No, and when you think of the as he says, the derbies that Shay's played in, like the Manchester derbies and the Sunderland Newcastle games as well, so much hostility to those matches.
Well, I do remember across all those years he was at Newcastle, you'd always be looking out for them. You'd always be hoping they'd kept a clean sheet, or that
Stephen Carr as well, of course.
Stephen Carr, exactly. Yeah, they'd done well. I've no warm feeling for Newcastle at the minute.
No, it's a bit different now, isn't it?
It is, and we were obviously asking about that, and I presume the very few Newcastle fans at this stage who are in any way anything other than just aboard the bandwagon. But I take no pleasure in them sort of competing for the Champions League and all this stuff. And he makes a very valid point that there are other clubs around the Premier League who are in the same boat with the money from questionable sources, and not just the obvious ones. But that's where I'm at with Newcastle at the moment.
It's fair. I think a lot of people are in the same boat, Adrian, to be honest, and some of the comments on YouTube as well along those lines. Paul Quirk says Newcastle recruitment has been brilliant. Everyone assumed that they would go crazy, distort the transfer market. Very strategic approach. It's a fair point as well. Like, even as you say, with the money, they have spent wisely with the money. Well.
But they will distort the market.
Oh, of course. It's inevitable.
Give them time.
But
no, they have. And even the Trippier signing seems like a very obvious thing now, and he's not he's not a young buck. Is he 32, 33?
Yeah.
And has come in and obviously captained the club and stuff. Not the obvious signings, but certainly spent very well.
Yeah. P. Well 74 says, if Newcastle get Champions League, will they then start signing the big names? Probably. C. Brackett, Newcastle's story is very hollow. Always saw them as a club with a strong culture, but none of that matters anymore. Like, I think a lot of people similar to your own views, Adrian, as well. A lot of the comments coming in on the Kerry club stuff as well. A lot of people having some strong views on that. Car Crash says, Shane's hosting, enjoy the cringe and the gaffs, see you tomorrow, gents. Well, Car Crash, good news, I'll be back hosting tomorrow, myself and Nathan, so I can't wait to see you then. So myself and Car Crash will have a bit of fun in the comments tomorrow.
Well, the gaffs with Nathan in the co-hosting chair, Shane, you can be guaranteed of that.
A few gaffs, yeah, exactly. So a lot of comments on the Kerry club stuff as well. It's fascinating. I would like to see the playing field levelled, but Larry McCarthy's comments, you'd imagine, hinting at that as well. So at 9:17 a.m. on this Tuesday morning's OTB AM, brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Here's what we've got coming up on OTB Sports Radio across today. At 1 o'clock, it's OTB Gold, Wexford 1956 Memories. 3 p.m, it's Dadcast. 4 o'clock, Brent Pope's best 15 he's ever played against. From 6 p.m, Joe meets Ruby Walsh, and 7 p.m, the evening show Off the Ball is live with Will O'Callaghan in the hoster's chair. You can follow OTB across all our social channels and subscribe to the OTB Podcast Network for all the best in the latest sports content. We will be back after these ads, but first, here is some GMAC motivation to set you right on your Tuesday.
Testing 1 2 1 2 GMAC 1 2. GMAC's morning motivational moment, or something along those lines. There's so many to choose from.
Good morning, Graham McDowell here, GMAC as you guys like to call me. Some Tuesday motivation for you now. Yesterday is gone, tomorrow is not yet come. We only have today. That's a quote from the great Mother Teresa. I'm a big fan of hers, up there with your Padre Pios, your John the Baptist, something along those lines. Anyway, that's your Tuesday motivation. See you tomorrow.
GMAC's morning motivational moment, or something along those lines. There's so many to choose from.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football Podcast?
What position are you playing, Sarah?
I'm playing in Katie McCabe's position, so tell her to watch out. And I'm only joking.
All joking aside, is it even part of your dream?
That's like saying, like, if you had an opportunity to go to the Olympics, would you not go? Of course you'd go. Of course you'd love to go. Of course it would be your dream. Any sports person's dream would be to play at the highest level of any sport that they can get to.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts and download the OTB Sports app.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Nearly 9:20 on this Tuesday morning's OTB AM. I feel like I'm like in creche here, or someone I have to look after, because Colin Buhig of Cork has joined us in the studio as well. But I'm sitting in between Adrian and Colin, and there's always the back and forth in the argument.
Creative tension, like
Sadio Mane and Mo Salah.
It's awful.
And I think Salah's missing it this year, you know.
What Ger would say, could we slip back the Komodo? Could we pull back the curtain a bit? Combs been outside for the last hour and a half, crying in the corner at trying to work his way through the aftermath of Andy Murray's dramatic victory at the.
You should have saved that for on air, because I laughed off her.
Yeah,
it was
good.
good.
You nearly spat your water out, actually.
Yeah.
It was good.
You're actually similar jumpers, lads. You're similar, no, different colours, but obviously both kind of going with the with the round neck.
Well, I would say Adrian's a knitted wear.
Very almost Noel Gallagher style on him. Like,
well, he needs all the support he can get at the moment. He said it's tough time.
It felt as if he'd been styled overnight, Shane. I mean,
Sunshine.
Not unlike yourself, of course.
I took a great as compliment to that. That big
well, it was intended as a compliment for you, Shane.
Column's shirt underneath actually looks, it's not similar to mine, but it's similar type of
I thought he'd got a tat overnight.
A tat?
Like a neck
on the
tat.
neck?
Then Mudrick has a tat that is
what does it say
talent ain't
everything.
enough. And then he has the talent crossed out, so he ain't enough.
Oh, lads.
Very unusual.
I mean, in the list of crap tattoos.
I really know. Do you know what? I'm loving the show this morning, because, like, you're right, Shane, the live sport angle when the show was on. Do you know the last time you were saying you couldn't remember the last time?
Cricket.
I think it was the New Zealand tour. Oh, the cricket. You
we
might
had
be
the
right,
Ireland
actually.
beating England in the
but I'm not sure. Do you know what? We were upstairs when we were when that was happening.
Oh, we're not down here.
I think we were upstairs on the 5th floor that week, because I remember we got
up and down that week, apparently.
Yeah, that's right. Kathleen saying
One of
dear.
those.
That's great. And
That's
but the New Zealand tour last summer. The New Zealand tour last summer, and we watched it.
So
during
glad we brought Colin in.
But it's a nice little live.
He's not
energy to it.
He
you know
says,
what I mean?
I've enjoyed the show.
Energy.
Well, we both know, Shane, he's been sat in the corner outside with his head between his knees, just trying to figure out what his thoughts are after. You must have been that Andy Murray stuff.
Oh, it was amazing. It was amazing, because Berrettini had that match point, which people have probably seen by now, even if they didn't watch the match on social. But Berrettini has this sitter, like, to put it home to win the match, and Murray stays on. And I really didn't think when he went 2 sets up and then went back to 2-2, as Catherine Murphy was saying already, like, she kind of banked on that going to the 5th set, and so did I after 2 sets. But I didn't think he'd win, like.
Do you know what, Colin? Do you know what?
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to bring it up, and I wasn't going to mention these comments, but there's a few of them coming in, and it wrecks my head, because, you know, if I talk about snooker and people give negative comments, I don't like it. I hate it. I fucking feel so defensive about snooker.
Go on.
Don't diss it. Someone says, John says in the comments, must save all this tennis talk for the next time I can't sleep. And there's a couple of negative. I mean, Jesus Christ, defend your sport here.
I've nothing to defend.
There's people giving out. It's a Grand Slam. A major. We're obviously going to talk about a major. It's Australian Open.
What do these people want? Like, do you know who said that?
John Head.
Whose phone is that? Whose phone is that?
John, is it?
John, yeah.
Yeah, what do you want?
The problem is,
because if we're keeping John happy, then Mary's coming on to us.
John, unfortunately,
yeah. So we can't go by what you all think. Like,
picked the wrong morning to suggest this. Like, he's been served a muffin top earlier on.
He loves this
with the Andy Murray match. Like, it was a brilliant match.
Yeah.
Couldn't have been more dramatic.
I agree.
Andy Murray's a good character.
Yeah.
He should never have won the game. He's aging. He's injured. Blah 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 blah. You picked the wrong game.
Yeah.
Like, but there's a lot of tennis. Like, I made the point earlier on about the basketball. If they could start 5 basketball games, one quarter after another, i.e. that you get to watch the final quarter of every game one after another, that'd be ideal.
Fair.
I feel the same way about tennis.
Yeah.
That it's such a dramatic sport and it comes down to such fine margins, but there's a lot of it that I could just do without.
Well, actually, the man of the moment, Andy Murray, was on a podcast with Gaël Monfils, the French tennis player who hosts his own podcast, and he was saying, like, if he was a spectator of tennis, he would get frustrated by best of 5 games because they're too long. They are too long. Like
who said that? Andy Murray.
Andy Murray himself. He said, if I'm a fan watching the sport, the vast majority of best of 5
is
set
he saying
games,
that because he's like 48,
dipping,
he's barely able to walk?
No, he's like I'm dipping in and out. I'm dipping in and out. Totally, yeah. But I think he's every so often it's great. Now they do reserve the best of 5 sets to the Grand Slams. But I think best of 3 is perfect because if you lose the first set in a best of 5 match, doesn't really make that much difference unless it's a massive underdog losing the first set.
What we need is the view of like a tennis geek who would, who's mad into the tennis and like loves all the ins and outs and the sort of the hipster aspect, Shane, of the stuff that we couldn't appreciate necessarily. If I can draw you into my camp,
of course, go on.
What's your view on you surely love? You wish it was 7 sets.
I just said.
What did you say?
But it was the best of. Yeah, you see, you were too. You see,
I thought you were giving me Andy Murray's.
What you were doing there? You were too preoccupied. I know what I'm going to say next. I know I was going to wait for him to finish talking. I know what I'm going to say. Yeah, you weren't listening. Yeah, I just said. Yeah, like it's too long.
Why is the women's game?
Some of them. I think football is too long at 90 minutes. So
why, Colin, is the women's game first to 3 sets and why is the men's game first to 5? Because you'd imagine fitness levels are similar. On a par.
Yeah, I mean it's a real contentious point because there's a striving for equal pay, and then the argument against is always, well, we play best of 5 and you play best of 3, so we should get more money. But it's always been the case that that there should be absolutely no reason that women shouldn't play best of 5. But it's nothing to do. For me, everyone should play best of 3. I don't think best of 5 serves its purpose. Right. The only time I play best of 5 is in the finals of the 4 Grand Slams for both draws, women's and men's.
Adrian has his hand up like a child in the back of the class.
At the back of the class there. I have an idea. A Gerard Piqué style idea. Make them all 4 sets. And I know what you're going to say, but that would introduce more drama because you would quite regularly end up in a draw and just send them to a tiebreak.
Well, that's
both men's and women's 4 sets.
Yeah, I mean, look, what's happening now with final sets is that it is going to a tiebreak to decide it. You're saying go straight to the penalty shootout, basically.
But it can't be an even. What do you mean?
So if they both...
No, if it's 2-2 after...
It'll regularly end up being 2-2.
Then, yeah. Then go to
just go straight to a tiebreak.
I'd be open to that. I would be open to it. I think it is a slog sometimes to watch, but sometimes look the best tennis match ever for many people was 2008 Nadal Federer, and we're thankful that went to 5 sets. That went all of the way, because it got better and better.
And then the other 400,000 games that have happened in the meantime that were boring the hell out of everyone.
Well, you can skip along. So remember we did 2001 last year. We did 2001. Even Eastovich Rafter, flashback, you, me and Owen Shane. And when we were watching it back in research, all of us skipped on to the start of the 5th set. Because the first 4 sets is
I watched it all.
Did you spend
did their full research?
4 hours and 55 minutes of your day the previous day? Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. I remember it because...
The face of a lying man.
I'm going to listen back to it now. And see what you said on air.
Kathleen says in the comment from the production box, I have a friend who was famously known in our group for around the 60-70 minute mark, turning around and saying 90 minutes no need during football. A lot of people have, I mean, it is a long... Tell you what, when you're playing a soccer match, 90 minutes is a long time.
Ref, how long's left?
How long's left?
17.
25 minutes.
Well, I enjoyed the added extra time, the added time at the World Cup, for example. Do you know? And it just depends on the game. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I suppose it was a brilliant World Cup, so the more the better. Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, I understand
Maybe we could introduce a tiering system where, a bit like club football and county football, we could say from the bottom half of the Premier League down, if it's a game between 2 teams from that area, you can only have 70 minutes.
Yeah.
So it'd be like a GAA club football versus a county football thing. And then for every other team, you can have the full 90.
You're like Gianni Infantino.
And if it was like a Manchester derby, we might even give you 100.
Right. 100 minutes just for the big games.
Yeah.
Adrian.
What do you think?
Back to sleep there. I don't think so.
Columns after dozing off.
I'm just reading through the comments. There's loads of comments.
But sorry, John, this is different, John O'Leary now on YouTube. This is from earlier. Do OTB just not know any Arsenal pundits who they could get on the show? As it's ridiculous how you stack every show at Man United, Liverpool and Newcastle, but as usual, nothing in Arsenal. You, John, must have been asleep on Friday when we previewed the North London derby with Tim Stillman. You must have been asleep last week when Andrew Mangan was on the evening show as well. We give Arsenal a lot of love on the show. We spoke about them heavily in the performance rankings yesterday. People only follow the narrative that suits them, I think. John, I love talking about Arsenal. Arsenal deserve all the praise.
Producer, that's,
Yeah, but we do talk Arsenal. We decided we do Newcastle today with Shay and Liverpool with Lauro because we didn't really get to touch on them yesterday.
We do tend to cover a lot of United and Liverpool, but
naturally
that's where fans in the country.
That's where you go. You go where the interest is.
Yeah, and I love talking Leeds as well, and Aston Villa and Everton and all these other clubs that have heavy Irish contingent. In
I
terms
would
of
love to
fans.
extend the show to 5 hours so we can do everything.
Yeah.
But we have to pick and choose it. Do you know what I mean?
lying.
I love the live aspect.
That's
you know,
a lie.
it's a
Well,
great, it's a great show.
I was flying
if
to
you were
Birmingham.
more involved now, you'd feel that way. You only come in every so often.
I was on a flight to Unai. I was at Unai Emery's first game at Villa Park, Villa against United, and the amount. No, it's probably no surprise, but the amount of Villa fans heading over. I thought, this is going to be a lot of United away fans heading over from Ireland, but massive Villa contingent in
The
Ireland.
third most supported English club
in Ireland.
Is it Leeds?
Good question.
I'd say Villa might be far off it.
Yeah. Historically, Villa and Leeds, as you say. A few Forest fans as well.
Well, there'll be a lot of latter-day Chelsea fans, latter-day City fans,
Latter-day
younger
City
supporters.
Arsenal are actually
Kathleen
third.
there with the tone of judgment in my ears.
That was
Arsenal
the
actually
most
the third most
passive-aggressive message
because
I've ever got in
Kathleen
my
is
ear.
the resident Arsenal fan.
Arsenal
Like, sorry,
actually-
is that a
it's
fact?
actually Arsenal.
It is a fact.
That was
sorry.
so passive.
Get your facts right.
Yeah. But she's actually right.
And there's another Arsenal talking head we have, Kathleen.
I mean,
do you know?
we're always
we can't move for Arsenal.
Bobby
talk.
Dwyer in the comments. Don't mind Arsenal fans.
Yeah.
They're a strange bunch. I mean, we do get Martin Lipton on every now and again talking Spurs,
And
but I mean,
JD. I think we have a nice little mix.
Nice little balance of clubs. We're not going to talk.
I would
about
like to do more Leicester and West Ham though.
You would.
Do you know it's getting so interesting in the Premier League, isn't it?
The which?
It's getting so interesting in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Like there are so many. Like we were doing the performance rankings yesterday, and we could have had 5 or 6 different candidates in the Premier League alone in the red.
Yeah.
Of the weekend.
There was so much to talk
The
about.
thing that I've enjoyed about this chat is there's now no need for an editorial after the show because
fair.
we've just done that now.
Well, you were going to talk
thing
about
in
it. You're here
terms
now.
of there's so many clubs to
You're
choose
here
from.
now. What would you like to talk about for the last few seconds?
We're here now.
Apparently, Kathleen sent me the stats in Ireland in terms of club supported. Liverpool come out on top at 25.67%, just ahead of United, Manchester United that is, on 23.2%, and Arsenal a fair bit behind in third, 11.86%.
And then who?
I don't know. I don't have the remaining figure, but that's Chelsea in fourth apparently. But that's, you're approaching 50, 61, like you're talking 61, 62% covered with just those three clubs. Yeah. So perhaps unsurprising.
Have you said everything you need to say about it? It feels like you must.
No, actually, I have one more question for you.
Sorry, Man City, Chelsea fourth, Man City fifth, Spurs sixth, then Everton, Villa, Newcastle, West Ham. That's the top 10 Irish.
Thanks for coming
supported
in.
Clubs. It's so many to choose from.
Question for you: if people are wondering, Adrian, they'll probably want your opinion on this. We won't hear from you again till Friday. What do you think of Breakpoint if people are thinking about watching it on Netflix? From what you've seen.
Like I watched the rest of the second episode now. So what I've seen, it's not bad. Like, if I hadn't to watch it because we were talking to the producers last week, I probably wouldn't have made it past episode 1. I think that would be a difficulty for people. Like, and also
the Nick Kyrgios episode.
The I think big part of the difficulty that they'll have is that its benchmark is Drive to Survive. That is a hard benchmark. Like, I know people, some people are critical of Drive to Survive. It's not maybe everything that's made out to be, but it's a very good behind the scenes. None of them actually, I mislabeled them myself. They're not really fly in the wall. Fly in the wall suggests you're getting a bit of everything. They're more behind the scenes.
Fly in the hallway as opposed to fly in the wall in which they're in.
Bit of fly in the hallway. So look, I would recommend to everybody go and watch episode 1.
Okay.
And then make your own mind up after that.
See, I think the best scene in the whole series so far in the 5 episodes is episode 2 between Berrettini and Tomljanovic. Berrettini in the news now this morning, and they're back and forth in the hotel room about their plans.
I thought that was
strange, wasn't it? Well, they broke up a couple of months later. And
what was the comment?
The comment was, well, Tomljanovic was out of the tournament. Berrettini was still in it. Tomljanovic had to do an interview the following morning, and Berrettini was like, well, you're not doing it in this room, so get out and go to a conference room or book something. And the tension between the two, it just showcased how selfish these people have to be in order to make it to the top level.
They're also in episode 2 discussing what movie they're going to watch. It's quite cringe. Like
that doesn't last so long that you'd be annoyed by the whole thing.
Well, it's just that it's the unlikeliness of it. The camera is obviously there, and then they're having this sort of a faux conversation about what movie they're going to watch.
Yeah, well, the producer said to us that those two were the more relaxed anyway. Definitely, maybe not the most, but the more relaxed.
Watch episode 1.
I'd say watch
to it. Keep going.
I'd say watch the first 2 episodes. Episode 1 is a misnomer. It's just Kyrgios. Just focuses on him. Episode 2 is more in line with the following 3 episodes where they focus on 2 players at a time. And if you have no interest after episode 2, then you're not going to like the rest of it. That's what I would say.
Right. I'm going to give it a watch. I'm going to give it a go. I've seen Point Break. Now it's time for a break point. Justin Flynn says, lads, it's heavily weighted towards United here. Come on. There's someone who usually comments on the YouTube. His YouTube name is We Hate Manx, and then a load of numbers, and then usually
what's his angle?
Well, I wonder what he's there. But every comment is Mank and then the following word not being not a very nice word, but he makes up a new one every single day.
Where's Shifty Lad? Is he?
Shifty Lad's not here this morning, fortunately. James Dillon says, going to the Emirates on Sunday. Can't wait for the Partey versus Casemiro midfield battle. This game has the early noughties Arsenal Man United fields. There is something about that, isn't there? I don't remember the last Arsenal-Manchester United game that both teams were coming in really, really good form. There's usually one or the other that's maybe flying, but on this occasion, it feels like the Fergie Wenger.
It's the perfect time of the season for them to be meeting as well.
Yeah,
you know, like post the City win, post the Spurs win. They've both hit the high point of their season.
Yeah.
I mean, albeit that United, as Shay Given would point out, reverse back into that high point, but nevertheless.
Do you think Arsenal will win the league?
If we scroll back, what are we now? The middle of January. Scroll back a month.
Did you?
I mean,
or
less than a month because we pre-recorded. We did our predictions of who's going to win the Premier League. There was 4 votes on the table. 3 of them, 3 sheep went for Manchester City.
He's calling myself Ger and Nathan sheep.
And I called you sheep at the time, in fairness.
Sorry, I stand by City. I stand by my Man City prediction.
It's getting more ludicrous by the week now.
We're not even halfway. There's another game to go until we're halfway.
I did say I was predicting Arsenal on the basis that
Jesus,
if they don't win it, then nobody's going to mention it again. And if they do win it, I'm going to select that clip and put it up on my social media feeds.
No doubt you are.
Stick it up on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I tend to do
so
it.
I went for Arsenal.
Okay, that looks good now. And what about the bottom 3 come the end of the season? Who's going?
Oh, I don't know. I can't even remember.
I'm going to go. You predicted your 3 yesterday.
I picked my 3. Yeah.
I'll go Forest, Bournemouth, Southampton. Okay.
Who did I pick?
Everton are too big.
You had Leeds with the 2 lads.
I had Leeds in there. Yeah. Sorry to all the Leeds United fans watching. Of course, there are a few. Yeah, I mean it's going to be a cracking game Sunday. I think it's delicately poised. I don't know which way it's going to go. Arsenal will be favourites, you'd imagine.
The relegation thing is impossible to tell
at the moment.
It's pure guesswork.
Well, I'm saying if you guessed it right now in mid-January, that would be very impressive.
You look brilliant.
I mean, that would be so impressive.
Yeah. Winning the Premier League is also guesswork, but at least it's just one selection
less
and
exciting.
based on some sort of.
This is the most competitive relegation battle that I can think of.
But you just can't tell what happens. You obviously need to see what happens over the next couple of weeks in terms of
but that's what I mean.
Signings.
From what you know at the moment, what would you say would be the bottom?
Well, from what you know at the moment, then you have to go West Ham, Everton, Southampton. But like
predicting how it's going to change. There's going to be an upturn. That's how it works. Like the stock
to
market.
be honest, I don't
like the stock market. You do. You do. Come on now. Give yourself more credit than that.
This has been fun, guys.
You used to watch Bernie Madoff on Netflix. It's a brilliant documentary about this stockbroker in New York.
Do you know what I'm watching at the minute? The Squid Game alternative.
I never got into
the alternative.
It's called that.
What, the hipster Squid Game?
Yeah, go on.
Oh, it must be very good.
You have it.
Alice in Borderland.
Oh, right.
Alice in Borderland.
Heard of it.
Not for the faint of heart.
Right?
Not for the faint of heart. Very much. If you thought Squid Games was bad, this is. I mean, in terms of
sounds like a border.
In terms of its approach to characters, that's what I'm saying. As opposed to the quality of the show, because it's very good. But this, in the regard of the way it treats its characters, is brutal.
Yeah.
Squid Game looks like a
Alice in Borderland. Follows a 26-year-old woman called Alison around South Armagh, North Monaghan area. Is that what it is? No.
No, it's not that.
It's not the
Very
story.
much not that.
Bernie Madoff, the biggest Ponzi scheme in the history of Wall Street, and his surname is Madoff, as he made off of people's money.
Oh, yeah, very good.
There was a guy who used to report on racing. His name was Guy Swindles.
Yeah, that's right. We're being told we need to wrap because we're talking muck at this point. But I do love it. I'm 2 episodes into Yellowstone, so just in case you're wondering what I'm watching, that's what I'm watching.
Good.
You know what? It's overacted so far.
Evan Costner?
Yeah, the acting is. Oh Jesus, I'm not into it so far. I really want to enjoy it because my mates have been bigging it up. So I think I'll get into it.
Bernie Madoff.
Part G song.
How long have we got?
Part G song. Lee Keegan. Come on, where are we
Someone
going?
please watch it so I can talk to someone about it.
Yeah. Well, you haven't even watched the Serena Williams, the King Richard yet. So
I know, I haven't got round to it.
You need to watch that. Well,
been busy.
Listen, we'll give you till tomorrow, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the YouTube comments. Abuse and all doesn't really matter. We'll take it. 9:37 a.m. We appreciate you watching us. As always, OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs. For an effortless finish to your day, we will be back tomorrow morning. Tommy Rooney's GAA Power Rankings, the first of the season. No pressure, Tommy. And Keith Wood live to talk about the many big storylines breaking in the rugby world this week. Right now, we are leaving you with Dominic King talking about Everton's woes from last night's show. Enjoy and have a terrific Tuesday.
Right now, I want to talk about Everton and the crisis that is engulfing the club, both on the pitch and off the pitch. I'm joined by Dominic King, who's the Northern football correspondent for the Daily Mail. Evening, Jonathan. Or evening, Dominic.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm all right. So, crisis, I think, is putting it mildly at Everton. On the pitch, then, they are second from bottom in the table. 10 defeats in all competitions from their last 13 games. 15 points. Joint lowest ever at this stage of the season. There is no question they are right in a relegation fight. And understandably, there have been murmurings and frustrations and annoyance and outpourings of anger from supporters towards the running of the club in recent weeks and even over recent seasons, but it's really boiled over the past few days. And the news came through on Saturday morning that the club chairman, Bill Kenwright, their chief executive, Denise Barrett-Baxendale, their finance director and club legend, Graham Sharp, who's also involved at a very senior level, wouldn't attend their game against Southampton because of the nature of police intelligence that had been gathered, and maybe that they wouldn't be safe if they went to the game. Now, Merseyside Police have issued a statement today. They've said that they are liaising with Everton Football Club following alleged threats towards directors ahead of the game against Southampton. No threats or incidents were reported to police prior to the game, but we are in communication with the club to establish if any offences have taken place and to ensure that any future reports are received through existing channels. Any threats reported to Merseyside Police will be assessed and investigated as a matter of course, and appropriate safety measures implemented. We're also aware of videos in circulation of fans approaching players' cars as they made their way from Goodison after the match. At this stage, no offences have been reported. This feels somewhat unprecedented, certainly in modern football, the attacks that are coming towards the directors. Can you fill us in as to how this has developed over the past couple of weeks?
It's there's one word I think that sums up the situation quite perfectly, and that's toxic. The club issued a statement on Saturday lunchtime in which they said the directors not being able to attend the match was a profoundly sad day for Everton, and I think it was unwittingly prophetic for everything that followed. It was a really, really sad day, and I'm full of animosity outside the stadium after the game, with young fans running after some of the players and videoing it all and putting it on social media. I mean, the fact that a man of Graham Sharp's stature and calibre wasn't able to attend, even though he wanted to, I think speaks volumes. There's, outside the main stand in Goodison Park, there's a picture of 5 of Everton's greatest strikers. Graham Sharp's on there. The picture must be about 60 foot from top to bottom of him. Sharpie in his absolute prime. And I think that is indicative of where they are. The fact that a man of his calibre can't even turn up.
The frustrations of the supporters, obviously it's been an incredibly disappointing on the pitch, and we'll get to that have been building over recent years towards the ownership. Like, from afar you might look at Everton and think, like, they spent insane money when Farhad Moshiri initially came in. You remember that summer when they signed Davy Klaassen and Michael Keane and Gylfi Sigurdsson for 40 million. They brought Cenk Tosun in for over 20 million. Theo Walcott was there, brought Wayne Rooney back to the club, and they're in the process finally of building their brand new state-of-the-art season. So money has gone in terms of players, maybe not in the last couple of years, but under this ownership, and they're making that big investment around the stadium. What is the root cause then of the anger towards the ownership?
Well, it's a build-up really. So take you back to when Farhad Moshiri came in, and Roberto Martinez was sacked after having taken the teams to an FA Cup semi-final, a League Cup semi-final. The league season was awful. I think they finished 12th, and it really tailed off. Ronald Koeman comes in, and that was supposed to be the start of a brave new era. Farhad Moshiri thought the Northwest was going to be the Hollywood of football. That was the quote he used, Hollywood. But Everton find themselves in this sorry state because the recruitment, primarily, and the decisions they've made with regards to football have been consistently bad. They've the signings in the main have not been improvements on players that they had at the club. If I just take you back 6 years ago yesterday, They beat Manchester City 4-0. It was Pep Guardiola's first year here. And in that team, Romelu Lukaku was up front, Ross Barkley, Gareth Barry were in midfield. Leighton Baines was playing wing back. It was an outstanding Everton side, and unfortunately, I say unfortunately, but it's been an absolute affront to supporters that the decisions and the players that have been brought in just haven't been good enough. They've chopped and changed. The squad now consists of players bought by 7 different managers. It's like sort of Frankenstein's monster. It's just a really, really depressing state. And fans, I mean, there's some of the most knowledgeable fans in the business, and they know football. They know what good football looks like. They know what the team should be. And at the moment, Everton don't reflect anything of the values that they see fit.
In terms of what happens with the ownership then, has Farhad Moshiri given any indication as to whether he wants further investment into the club, as to whether he's going to sell the club, or does he feel that this new stadium is going to be his crowning moment and come hell or high water, he's going to hang around to be there on that opening day?
Yeah, look, he's made it clear. He has a 94% stake in the club now, so he is the controlling figure. He made it clear in the summer that he was looking for new investments, and the new investment, I think, is to help make sure that the stadium is the stadium which is going up at a rate of knots on the banks of the River Mersey is finished and to the standard that they want. That is the absolute. Everton need a new stadium, as wonderful as Goodison is. It belongs to a bygone era, really. I mean, it's not conducive for a comfortable experience for fans in modern football. In terms of queuing up for drinks at half time, and just the facilities, they're old, they're dated, and there's no scope for improving it, really. So the stadium's a must, but above all, the team, improving the team is what really matters. And there's no point having a shiny new stadium if the team's going to be in the Championship. And that, sadly, looks like where they're heading at the moment, because they're in an awful sort of vortex of not being able to score goals and conceding too many.
In terms of the directors and the threat then, obviously Merseyside Police have said nothing has been reported to them, but there was a story when this first came out that the chief executive, Denise Barrett-Baxendale, had been put in a headlock by a fan after a recent home game. That was from a club source. Has that been verified? That's something that it feels will be somewhat unprecedented in modern football.
Yeah. This is you have to forgive me, because it's a very, very delicate subject. This, and I think there's more. There might be more developments later tonight in terms of the club issuing statements about it. I don't know whether they're going to speak specifically about that, but you're right. It's a hugely very, very serious allegation that's been made, and God forbid if anybody has done that to a woman, has anybody put their hands on it and thinks it's acceptable, they're an absolute disgrace. And going back to some of the scenes that we see in terms of players being pursued in their cars, again, it's just overstepping the line. It's just a horrible, horrible situation. It's no way to behave. But there's talks going on with Everton and Merseyside Police, and I don't know whether they're going to comment specifically about certain incidents, but I think this story is going to run for the rest of the week.
You mentioned there Everton fans, they know their football, they've been around the block. I'm wondering how this progresses with this current ownership and this current board of directors. So even if results do start to improve and Everton can go on a run, there's been little sign of they can go and run and get out of the relegation zone and start moving up towards mid-table. Would that have a big impact on the protests, on the attitude towards the board, or is this standoff just likely to run and run?
No, I think the people who are protesting, and the people who are protesting, and they absolutely have the right to protest, they're so entrenched in the views now that nothing will placate them until the changes that they want to see are swept through the club. Now it all depends on whether Farhad Moshiri wants to do that. He's only spoken a couple of times. He's obviously spoken to TalkSport. Briefly, he's issued a couple of statements, but he hasn't been to Goodison Park since the 21st of October, I think, 2021, 22nd of October, maybe. So he's like the absentee landlord. He's taken a hands. It's been briefed to us that he's taken a hands-off approach in the last 12 months, but he is calling the shots. He's still in the background making decisions. And the fans want to see him freshen things up, bring new people in. But again, it's an awful situation in the fact that Everton at the moment that really wouldn't appeal. It's like players. They need players to come in, but the bottom of the table, and it's the players that they want wouldn't necessarily be attracted to the situation, even though Everton's just a fantastic name.
And what about in terms of a change of ownership then? We look at Liverpool are up for sale, Manchester United are up for sale. We've seen Chelsea go for, up over $2.5 billion. Surely there will be an opportunity with the new stadium coming down the track for Farhad Moshiri to sell up and make a profit?
Well, that's. I'll be honest with you. I don't know how that situation is going to work out. He's made it clear that he wants investment. If there was somebody who came in and were prepared to give, see out the cost of building the stadium and give him his money back, then maybe he would jump at that. But he's such a mysterious figure. Who knows what's next?
So only 3 wins then on the pitch all season. They are yet again in a right old relegation scrap. And listen, the jury is very much out on Frank Lampard and his quality as a manager. When you mentioned there sort of Frankenstein's monster and this team been an amalgamation of 6-7 different managers, and when you look back from Carlo Ancelotti was the Everton manager, from a Carlo Ancelotti to a Marco Silva who's doing wondrous things at Fulham, to Sam Allardyce been there, different managers, different characters, different styles of play. It feels similar somewhat to Graham Potter, maybe at a lower level at Chelsea, that he's having to work with players that he's not quite sure about, that are on enormous salaries that the club can't get rid of, and he is not getting any investment to bring in players that he might want. That, look, and maybe that's just a more experienced manager can deal with that better.
Possibly, but the thing that worries me about Everton is the fact that they. The confidence is just being sucked out of them. On Saturday, that was as an alarming defeat as I've seen at Goodison. The moment James Ward-Prowse equalised, you could sort of feel the belief sucking out of them, draining from them, the colour draining from people's faces, and the lack of confidence, the rut that they're in. It only suggests they're going one way. And if we're making comparisons, I know you said Chelsea, but there's two that come to mind with me. One, Aston Villa and Sunderland, in terms of, they had both of those clubs had big ambitions, in the early parts of the century. When Aston Villa were with Martin O'Neill, they were pushing for the Champions League places, but they bought badly. They chopped and changed the managers. And then they ended up paying the price in 2016 and being relegated. Sunderland, we know how many times did they chop and change managers over a 6-year period after Niall Quinn had been chairman. It's an awful situation, and I'm really. I never believed that Everton would go down. I never ever believed in my lifetime that Everton would go down. But on Saturday, the whole situation with how toxic and how entrenched people's views are now, and the way they're playing, I'm more concerned than I've ever been.
And that toxic atmosphere and the effect it's having on the players on the pitch, it makes it very hard to judge the quality of the side, it feels like at the moment, because they're all been affected so much that they can't get anywhere near their best. Because when you do look through that 11, like Jordan Pickford is, the England goalkeeper, and he mightn't be everybody's cup of tea, but there's no doubt there's a lot of quality there. Tarkowski and Cody come in during the summer and you think, all right, got them on the cheap, but rock solid Premier League defenders with a lot of experience, but haven't got anywhere near the levels they got to at Wolves or at Burnley. Amadou Onana played for Belgium at the World Cup and was probably one of the few players who did all right for Belgium at the World Cup, a good young talent. Mikalenko's been a decent signing. Idrissa Gueye, they were probably pleased to get back from Paris Saint-Germain. And like Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and maybe he sums it up and his injury problems sum it up, like he looks to have the weight of the world on his shoulders from where a position 2 years ago where you thought Everton fans won't like it. Like this guy could easily go for monstrous money to one of the top four teams.
You're absolutely right. Arsenal 18 months ago, the indications were that Arsenal were really going to go all out to get Calvert-Lewin. And I know that discussions had taken place at certain levels with regard to move for him going to the Emirates Stadium. That's how good he'd been playing. But you're right, it's the confidence is drained. And I mean, you mentioned the two central defenders, but they're not getting the protection that they need in all areas of the pitch. Idrissa Gueye was fabulous in his first spell at Everton, but he just hasn't got anywhere near those heights since he came back. Onana, he was the one player on Saturday that had to be excused from any kind of criticism. He was excellent, tried his absolute hardest, but as I said, the squad just lacks depth, it lacks quality, it lacks goals, and unfortunately it's going to be a struggle all the way till the end of the season.
With what's going on off the pitch, is that protecting Frank Lampard right now, that the board's attention is elsewhere?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Frank's been in football long enough. He's worked with enough managers. He's been around enough situations to know that if you're on a run of 10 defeats in 13 games in all competitions, it basically only heads one way. So unless he can mastermind something very, very quickly, he knows he's in a very, very difficult place. He's quite realistic about it. He's spoken openly to us about it. Said he doesn't need any reassurances from the owner. The owner came out and said last week that he publicly backed him, but I think we all looked at that statement and realised that it wasn't really worth the paper that it was written on, because he did something similar 12 months ago with Rafa Benitez and sacked him 3 days later. So it really doesn't matter what Farhad Moshiri says in public. Results will dictate what happens to Frank Lampard.
And there's certainly a Survivor Series feel of that game on Saturday of West Ham and Everton down at the London Stadium that you feel for Moyes or for Lampard. Whoever loses it, that's probably the end of the road, and who knows, maybe one ends up at the other at some stage over the next few months as well. Dominic, it's pretty grim at the moment for Everton supporters, but thanks a lot for joining us and talking us through everything that's been happening.
It's a pleasure to be on. Look after yourself and see you soon.
Dominic King there, Northern football correspondent for the Daily Mail.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch Premier League, Women's Super League, EFL, Scottish Premiership and much more. Live on Sky Sports.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.